What's up, everybody? Welcome back for week 2 of the PFF NFL show here in the NFL regular season. Today, it's another episode of the Grades Release Show where we're going to be going through every single game that you saw on the Sunday slate, go through the most impressive, the most disappointing. We'll give you the top fives from every team, and of course, a PFF stat that told the story of the result that we saw in those games. Trevor Sikkema, Dalton Wasserman back here with you. Dalton, Jets got the big dub this week.
Got a big W. One of the few favorites that actually took care of business this week. I mean, it was still a tight game, but, man, it was a week for underdogs.
And I got to say this. I watched the game with Dalton.
Oh, boy.
You would not have been able to tell that the Jets were even winning the game. You would have thought they were down by 45 the entire time. But I feel like that might be just Jets fandom.
Yeah, that's just kind of how it works. It's there's times where it's more of a mental illness than a fandom. Honestly, I think Jet fans can relate to that everywhere. But no, it was tight. Look, they struggled early again, and their defense doesn't look quite what we thought it would be so far. We'll get into that, but thankful we have Aaron Rodgers. That's for sure.
I was gonna say, come on, man, you just gotta celebrate the wins at this point.
You could do a lot worse even with a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers than that.
We will get into that. Like you said, we got the Jets a little bit later in the show. Let's start off. I feel like we should start with Sunday Night Football's game. I don't know if we'll do that every time on this show, but certainly we got one that was kind of coming down to the wire. Obviously, it's a team that is in heavy ascension with the Houston Texans, now 2-0 on the season. Obviously, Caleb Williams as well, the number 1 overall pick. So there's a lot of things to talk about and break down in this game. First, I want to get to the top fives, though, because this is what we'll do to intro every single game. If you guys are new here on the show, that's what we're going to do. It's a grade release show as much as a review show. So let's get into some of these top fives, and let's do Houston's top 5 first, because holy cow, man, this is an impressive group. D'Amico Ryan's defensive guy, and you got so many defensive players literally in the top 5 from what we saw in Sunday Night Football last night. Number 1 graded player last night for the Houston Texans was their edge rusher, Danielle Hunter, who we talked about as one of the top free agency ads of any team this offseason. He's number 1 on that list. Rookie Kamari last year, look at that. Got himself an interception, got his hands on the ball last night, 90.0 overall grade, the second highest graded player. Free agent, another free agent addition, Azeez Al-Shaair, the linebacker, reuniting with D'Amico Ryans. We felt like that was going to be a good connection. 87.6 grade there. Wide receiver Nico Collins continues to prove that last year was not a fluke for him. He comes in at number 4, 87.3. And then cornerback / safety, just overall defensive back, Jalen Petrie at a 78.1. CJ Stroud, their quarterback, got a 75.2. Chicago's top 5. We'll get into them before we kind of break down the stats that told the story. Safety Jaquan Brisker, 80.5. That was the top graded player for the group. Defensive tackle Andrew Billings tying him with an 80.5 as well. Number 3, cornerback Kyler Gordon, 75.1. 4, Tremaine Edmonds, their linebacker, 73.7. And then edge rusher Montez Sweat with a 73.1. Caleb Williams, just a 45.1 grade there last night. I'm going to start with you, Dalton, because we both kind of have a stat that told the story, which has to do with Caleb Williams. You know, if you notice, if you just kind of listen to what I said, all defensive players there in the top 5 for Chicago. Now, we figured that this team was going to be led by their defense, but we're hoping to sprinkle in a couple of offensive players there with some top performers. So what did you think about this game? Obviously, the Texans coming away victorious in this one. What was the stat that told the story here for you?
It was all the way around. It was a struggle for the Bears to handle pressure, and the Texans are known to have one of the teams with one of the lowest blitz rates in the league. Well, they blitzed a ton in this game, and neither the offensive line nor Caleb Williams handled it well. I'll go with the angle on Williams. 31.1 passing grade against the blitz, just 4 for 11 with 14 yards. The interception to Lassiter that you mentioned, and another interception to Lassiter that got called back on a defensive penalty from somebody else. So 2 turnover-worthy plays for Caleb against the blitz. That was the difference in the game. And again, D'Amico Ryans, he comes from that San Francisco system, Robert Saleh and all. You know, it's kind of just zone-heavy and rush for, and that's what they're famous for. But they blitzed a lot more in this game than they normally do. They broke the tendencies, and once they found it worked, especially late in the game, they stayed on the gas. And Caleb, again, I think the biggest adjustment for him in the NFL is speeding up the process, right? You don't have 3.6 seconds on average like you did in college to just wait around and be the best athlete on the field. These guys are just as good athletes as you are, especially when they're sending DBs and linebackers and guys from all over the place, and then stunts within the blitzes that were just, I mean, they drew up everything this week in Houston. But Caleb has to speed up the process, struggled against the blitz, and could see more of it going forward.
Yeah, for my stat that told the story, it also has to do with sort of Caleb Williams, and it's a little bit of a piggyback off of what you're saying. I think people looked at last night and they looked at the Bears' offensive line as the main culprit. Like when I'm looking at social media during the game, as much as I'm watching, and you get a lot of people who are just killing the Bears' offensive line. And I was upstairs talking to some of the guys that were upstairs, and the Bears' offensive line, admittedly, they were struggling with some of the stunts and twists and the different types of pressures that the Texans were bringing. And, hats off to them. They were doing a good job. And I think the offensive line definitely needs to be better. But I do think that it is more of a collective failure than just saying, the Bears didn't focus on their offensive line the way that they needed to this offseason. Now it's coming back to bite them. I still think a lot of what we're looking at is growing pains with them, particularly when you look at how the offense is set up for Caleb Williams to run it right now. And particularly, I want to look at this. When you look at Caleb Williams and the Bears, they are fourth in the NFL right now in passing plays out of empty with no tight end attached to the line of scrimmage. So we're talking about a true 5 wide. There's no running back standing next to him for extra protection to be able to pick up a blitz. There's no extra tight end attached to the line of scrimmage, to be able to help on the edge or anything like that. We're talking about a true empty 5 wide set. And I think people look at Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, because at times last year with Seattle, he also sort of did not help his offensive line or made things very difficult with them in how he was setting up protections. And people kind of look at that struggle with the Bears and they say, oh, this is kind of a Shane Waldron problem as well. It might be a little bit, but I don't want to put it all on Shane Waldron, because where you look at those sets and you go, he's not giving that offensive line or Caleb Williams any help. That's kind of what Caleb is used to, right? You go back to last year. USC was 15th of all of the FBS schools in that same category. Empty sets, no tight end on the line of scrimmage. He's giving Caleb what he is used to. The difference is he's playing against an NFL defense, and where he could retreat in the pocket and run around and have those Superman plays from empty at USC, you don't really get to do that at the NFL level. And instead, when you play empty, you've got to be very confident and keyed on to what your hot reads are. And I don't think Caleb Williams is there quite yet. So yes, the offensive line can play better. Yes, Shane Waldron can maybe do a little bit better job of setting up the protection to help him a little bit here. But Caleb also has to be better. I just think it is a collective growing pain issue that they are going through of what kind of offense they really want to be. And if you want to be heavy out of empty, very spread out in the formation, Caleb's just got to be better at getting to whatever his hot read is. And I just don't think that he is there yet as a player.
Yeah, and you know what? On all of that, I'm gonna jump ahead here actually with my most disappointing part of this game, and I'm gonna stay on the Bears side. And look, there's two ways that you beat really good pass rushers and teams running all those blitzes, and when you're having issues up front, look, you have to play with tempo. And I think towards the end of the game, when they started running with more tempo and they were in that 2-minute setting, it was better. But you have to run the ball. And Bears running backs had 17 carries for 27 yards and no missed tackles and no explosive plays. They will not win if their running backs have 27 yards. I don't care how good Caleb ends up.
Sure.
If they have no balance whatsoever, I don't care how good Caleb is in his rookie year. They won't win any games like that. Their lack of a running game allowed them, at first it got them in bad situations, and then allowed the Texans to get into all those blitz packages that honestly we didn't even really know they had because they don't use them a lot. But when you're constantly 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 because you can't run the football, they looked incapable of running the football last night. And Caleb was their leader in rushing yards because of scrambles and what he does, but he won't carry them in year one. He just won't. I know the expectations are there. And I know there's Bears fans out there who have playoff expectations and think, oh, we could win 12 games. Caleb's Superman. He's our quarterback. You can't make him do that. You can't, because you could see already, one, he was getting hit a lot. You could see by the end of the game he was slowing down, getting hit. And two, a little bit demoralized at times, it looked like in the fourth quarter. He's like, man, they're just teeing off on me.
Right.
And there wasn't a whole lot of help for him. So, no, Caleb wasn't great last night. It's not all on him, but they need to find a way to run the ball. You signed DeAndre Swift. You're supposed to have 3 good backs, and the offensive line has to put it together. As an offense, they have a lot to fix. It's not just Caleb Williams, but if their running backs only have 27 yards, if they only have 1.5 yards to carry, they're going nowhere.
Yeah, I'll get into kind of my most impressive in this one, and I want to flip sides for it. It's Houston Texans edge rusher Danielle Hunter. And I talked about him as a major signing for them this offseason. I think people looked at it and John Grenard had a great year for them as well. He actually flips over to the Minnesota Vikings, and the Vikings let Hunter go. And I think you brought this up when we were talking about it. It might have been in the preview show. It might have been as a result of week one. But you talked about how Flores specifically, and I can't wait to get to Flores. We'll get to breaking down his defense later on the show. But what he wants to do is just stay as versatile as possible. And Grenard is more of that outside linebacker type that allows you to drop him back as much as rush. Hunter's more of just, hey, I'm more of a defensive end, pass rusher type of an edge player. That's exactly what the doctor ordered for the Houston Texans.
They both went to a better fit. It seems weird, like why would they just swap guys? But
yes.
They're two different players. And Hunter and Anderson, that's just a nasty duo as two classic defensive ends like that.
And I think that is the point, is a lot of people looked at this offseason and went, oh, okay, so the Vikings lose Hunter, gain Grenard, and the Texans lose Hunter and gain other way around. They lose Grenard and gain Hunter, and they said, oh, it's just a wash. It's not a wash. Both of these teams got better by both of these players moving to these spots. And so obviously you see an elite PFF grade. He's the top graded player for the Houston Texans. And he had 3 tackles, 1.5 sacks. One of those sacks was late in the fourth quarter. It was that clutch sack where he just, he won very quickly off of the edge against Darnell Wright, and just put his shoulder straight into Caleb Williams.
I was worried about Caleb.
I was worried too, and he popped up, and I'm very thankful for it. But that was I think second down is when he got hit hard on that play. And it was the drive where, hey, you basically needed to score a touchdown here. And even though Caleb got up, no timeouts, and you could tell Caleb was like,
and it took them, I think
all right.
You mentioned it took them like 20 seconds to get back into the next play. You needed the tempo, and he took that was nowhere near the first body blow he took all night. You could tell he was hurting. I mean, he probably needed the extra long ice bath after that game.
But it was just it's such an impressive performance by Danielle Hunter. But you're most impressive in this one. Who you got?
Staying on the Texans defense, Kamari Lassiter had an interception, should have had a second one. There was a penalty called on somebody else in coverage. Could you imagine him and Stingley? Did we think Lassiter would be this good, this quick? It's
not this good, this quick. There's something to that.
A 90.3 coverage grade, gave up 3 catches for 20 yards. And honestly, you look snap to snap, he was shutting down Rome Odunze all night. Lassiter won the battle against. He saw Odunze the most, and he was winning the battle. And honestly, the interception that actually counted. What a spectacular play that was, with Caleb rolling to his right, clearly a weapon, and he knew when Caleb rolled to his right. He was looking. Lassiter was kind of in this spot where he could have got high load, and Williams could have made the right throw under, but he knew. He was just like, oh, he's going to take a shot here, and he sinks back from where he's at, and he just makes an incredible play on this interception. If Kamari Lassiter is going to play like that, this might be the best pair of cornerbacks in the league. I mean, there's some good ones. We've got Sauce and Reed with the Jets, and Lattimore and Adebo are really good with the Saints. There's a couple others, but that version of Lassiter with Stingley getting an interception also on just a fantastic play, they were looking for a number 2 corner this offseason, and they may have drafted one.
I feel like we're spending a ton of time on this game, but there's just so many great things to point out. Stingley's interception was unbelievably impressive to me because if you watch the play, and they showed the end zone, a version of what would be like the end zone angle from that play. He's got inside leverage on DJ Moore, and Moore kind of, he veers a little bit to the outside to attack that inside leverage and get Stingley to basically open up, right? Kind of give away his leverage, get even with him, gets a little bit towards the sideline and what looks like a diamond release from him. And then boom, he gets right back inside, right across the face from Derek Stingley. And you just notice zero panic in Derek Stingley.
Nope.
Zero. In fact, it was like it was business as usual. He got into trail, he immediately caught up, and his head was around almost as the ball was getting released because he knew he played that perfectly. He knew that it was almost like the inside leverage was bait for him. That's how confidently he played that. And just if Stingley's playing at that level and Lassiter's playing at that level, you mentioned it's awesome. My most disappointing is just Tank Dell, simply because he got 11 targets, only 4 catches on the year. That chemistry, those two, him and Stroud were really connecting last year, and it's just not on point right now. So we talked about sort of the offense for the Bears kind of being the most disappointing, but if I sort of had to nitpick for Houston, I imagine what this offense is going to be like when the Tank Dell and CJ Stroud connection is like it was last year. So that being off to a slow start's a little disappointing this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're talking about, but they've been focused on Nico Collins, right? Nico Collins has been getting the matchup, and I don't have any issue with that. We were curious how all the targets would be shared on that Texans team. Diggs is obviously making some third down grabs or getting Dell working back from the injury, but right now it's Collins leading the way. So I think Dell is going to improve in the coming weeks, and we even saw plays from Dalton Schultz and plenty from Joe Mixon. Hopefully he's healthy going forward. But Collins is the number one guy right now, and everyone's going to have to fall in line behind that.
Did you give your most disappointing for this one?
I did, yeah. It was where did it go?
Oh, the run game.
Yeah, the run game.
Yeah, run game. Definitely needs to be better there. Let's make Walt happy here in the chat. We'll go with Raiders Ravens next. 26-23 here.
This was a weird one.
Las Vegas Raiders.
This was a weird game.
It was kind of strange because the Raiders come out on top, and I think that obviously not a lot of people were predicting that the Raiders would come out on top. But you look at the statistics of this game, and it's not like the Ravens played really poorly. It was just a close football game, and they didn't come away with the win at the end. And what's your stat that told the story here with how the Raiders ended up winning this game?
You want to go the top 5 first, actually, or do you want to go right?
We should go with the top 5 first. You are correct.
We'll stay on schedule.
Way to save my ass there. I appreciate it. Let's start with Las Vegas, okay? And the reason why I want to start with them is because of rookies at the very top. Brock Bowers, wow.
Love him.
He's a good football player. Was good for every single year that he was at the University of Georgia winning national championships, and look at that. He's good in the NFL. 83.1 overall grade. Devontae Adams is next on the list, 77.1. Max Crosby, 76.4. Divine Diablo coming in at number 4 at a 70.8. And then Jack Jones at number 5 with a 68.4. Gardner Minshew would have been in that top 5 with a 73.1. We'll talk about him more in a second. On Baltimore's side of things, edge rusher Odafe Owe was top on the list with 87.8. Travis Jones showing up here early on in this season, 82.0 as the number 2 guy on that list. Ronnie Stanley coming in at number 3, 81.6. Kyle Van Noy, their edge rusher, 78.7. And then Derrick Henry, a 74.7 to be at number 5. Lamar Jackson would have been just outside of that here as the QB that we give recognition to. Lamar had a 73.2 overall grade in this one. So now that we have talked about the top 5s, what's the stat that told the story, my friend?
I'm going to stay with Minshew in the passing game, and really just a better effort in the second half from the Raiders than the first half, obviously. The first half, EPA per pass for the Raiders was minus .637, which is pretty much just stagnant. There's nothing. They're doing nothing. There's no efficiency. There was also no run game, obviously, early on. There was just nothing going for the Raiders. And then they found their groove in the second half, a plus .225, which is a really good number, EPA per pass in the second half. You could just feel it. You could just, you know what, let's just abandon the run game. Let's just get Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers and all these weapons going, and that's just what's going to work today. We're not going to win running the football. We're already behind. Minshew found a rhythm. He found a rhythm with his best weapons, and honestly, that's just what you saw from the Ravens. It's just they got ahead, and they just couldn't cover their best players and couldn't hold the lead, and eventually they just found a way to break them down kind of slowly. That's all. That's why it felt weird, because it didn't feel like, I know the Devontae Adams, like the toe drag catch was just spectacular, but it didn't feel like there was one specific moment where the Raiders took this game over. They just kind of slowly, one first down at a time, just kind of clawed back into it. And we've talked about it for a bit. This Raider defense can get hot. There's a lot of talent on this defense, and credit to them for keeping them in this game too. But the main reason they won this game for me was just Minshew and the entire passing game finding the rhythm in the second half.
No, I think you're completely right. And my stat that told the story is just a specific Minshew stat, and that was that he had 2 big-time throws in this game, and Lamar had none. And in fact, Minshew, to go along with your point about EPA per play and EPA per pass for them being better in the second half, both of Minshew's big-time throws were in the second half. Both of them led to points. One led to a touchdown drive, and the other one was to a field goal. That ended up, getting them close in this game, getting them tied, and then allowing them to win. So when you look at Gardner Minshew, the 2 big-time throws in the second half led to points, like I mentioned. 6th in passing grade, an elite 90.2 on throws of 10 yards or more this season. So I think that is something that's absolutely worth recognizing, because in a year where we're seeing passing down across the board, a lot of these elite passers under 200 yards over the first 2 weeks, not a lot of big-time throws. Minshew's out here dicing them.
Yep.
Minshew's fearless. He's letting the ball fly, and he's connecting. So he is right now a top 8 passer in the league. I get it. It's only 2 weeks. I'm not saying that he's, overtaking some of these other guys when it comes to overall talent, but you got to give him credit where it's due. The rest of the league is kind of skittish right now when it comes to attacking a lot of these, quarter, half coverages, these too high coverages, and Minshew's like, I'm letting it fly.
Oh yeah,
I don't care. I'm letting it fly. And,
there is not a single bone in his body that has any fear in it. I think we've seen that for a long time with multiple teams. He's a gamer. If nothing else, he's going to go out there and he is just a gamer. He's going to compete.
He's also got
as hard as he can.
The second most completions of 10 or more yards in the NFL right now. So that's the story here for the Raiders, is that they have a fearless, confident Minshew throwing the football, and that's what's giving them a chance to punch above their weight class, if you will, when you look at their roster head up against other teams. So
absolutely,
he's my most impressive as well. So I mean, he kind of has to be. What about you? Who's your most impressive?
I'm going with that rookie weapon you just mentioned, Brock Bowers. So 9 catches, 98 yards, 5 first downs, and 84.6 receiving grade. And I think for me, he made 3 catches in a row on their last drive that scored the touchdown to Adams just before that. 3 catches in a row that were all really big catches. And look, it's funny because nobody would argue that Devontae Adams is the best player, right? But I think the hardest piece of this offense to game plan for is Brock Bowers. He just lines up all over the place. He could be at tight end. He could be in the slot. He could be out wide. He could be in the backfield, just anywhere. Brock Bowers, when you flip it on, is actually the biggest problem when you go, okay, how do we solve this? Because with Adams, you go, okay, we either have a lockdown corner or something like that. We could throw at him, let's say a Sauce or a Jair Alexander, something like that.
Right.
Or you have to bracket and do the usual things with the number 1 receiver.
Right.
With Bowers, it's like a Rubik's Cube, man. Wherever he lines up, you don't know any given play pre-snap, and I would have to really dig in on what the tendencies are right now. Didn't have enough time considering we're doing 15 games this morning, but what did you
sleep last night?
I imagine not much, but it's just
it's over a minute. You're fired.
It's football season. Come on now. It's just with Bowers, though. I think his alignments and finding him pre-snap in that 10 to 15 second window you have to find him, I think that's the hardest part of defending this Raider team right now. Even though you have a Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, a really good weapon, and Trey Tucker's a speed guy, and Michael Mayer's, they do have a lot of weapons in the passing game, but Bowers' versatility is the hardest part to defend, I think.
Look, 9 targets, 9 catches, man. I mean,
that'll do.
The chemistry, the confidence, whatever you want to call it, between Gardner Minshew and the rookie Brock Bowers is already there. My most disappointing from this game is the Raiders' run game. No matter how Minshew is playing, it's just got to be way better than certainly it was against the Baltimore Ravens. 40.6, the lowest team rushing grade that we have so far through 2 weeks in the NFL. Second lowest yards before contact total. They only have 11 total rushing yards before contact through 2 games. That's it. The only team that's lower is the Jets, but I won't bring that up because
we're working on it.
We're friends. I'm not gonna bring that up.
No.
Why would I bring that up?
I don't bring up the Florida Gators either. It's fine.
Yeah. And you just did, and I was having a good time.
Yeah.
And now I'm not.
It's always a yin and yang to these things.
Colton Miller and Dylan Parham, they were the only serviceable run blocking grades that we had in this game. Jackson Powers Johnson needs to get in this lineup, I think, because for as much as, okay, maybe he won't be able to bully people in the NFL exactly the way that he did at Oregon, he's got some nastiness to him, and he can really help out in the run game specifically. So they need to get him in this lineup. Who's the most disappointing for you?
For me, I learned something about this Ravens defense, and I know he was out with I believe a neck injury he suffered from I believe he was in a car accident last week. Nate Wiggins, during the week, he was in a car accident, had some sort of, they listed him with a neck injury, but he missed this game. Nate Wiggins needs to start when he gets back, I think. The Ravens corners, especially Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens, gave up 12 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown in this game, and through 2 weeks have not looked incredibly impressive, and we're used to the Ravens getting good play in their secondary, but on the outside they need some help. I think it's why they drafted Wiggins. When he gets back healthy, I think he needs to see a lot more playing time. I think it was 17 or 18 snaps in their first game against Kansas City. And from what we saw in the preseason, he was really good. He was really good when he was on the field in week 1, and if they want to play if they want to play more man coverage and do the things one-on-one what they can do and send blitzes and obviously have Kyle Hamilton roving all over the place, I think this Ravens cornerback room needs to get better. So when Wiggins is healthy, I think more playing time is in order here.
All right, next game, talk about the Carolina Panthers. So put in the hazmat suits. We're digging in. Chargers at Panthers in this one. Did not look competitive basically at any point in time other than when the score was 0-0 and the game was starting. 26-3 was the final score, and the Chargers take this one. They are victorious. We'll start with the Chargers because we'll start with the positive here when it comes to the top 5 safety. Elijah Molden, elite 92.5 overall grade. Love to see that. I was a big fan of Molden coming out during his draft class, so I love to see him at the top of that list. Diane Henley, their second-year linebacker, 90.5. Cornerback Christian Fulton, 87.9. Joe Alt, still in the top 5 this week, 87.2. Actually, I think the team was so good last week, if I remember correctly, Joe Alt wasn't even in the top 5. Now he gets in there. So 2 good weeks back-to-back for the rookie. And then guard Zion Johnson with an 85.8. Man, just some really high scores for the Los Angeles Chargers over the last 2 weeks. Justin Herbert, not his best game, 54.8 overall grade. And then when we flip sides to Carolina, it's not as pretty. The guy who is number 1 for Carolina wouldn't even be on the list for the Chargers, if that puts that into perspective for you. Guard Robert Hunt tops the list at 74.1. Safety Jordan Fuller with a matching 74.1 at number 2. Cornerback J.C. Horn, 69.5 at number 3. Taylor Moton at number 4, 67.1. And then cornerback Mike Jackson, 65.7. Bryce Young would not have made the top 5. He comes in with a 38.8 overall grade in this one. Dalton, tell us the stat that told the story. What do you think about this one?
I'll start on the positive side.
Please do.
This Chargers offensive lines, you saw Alt and Johnson on that top 5 right there. This is a real story. So their front 5 together in this game had an 88.5 overall grade. Trevor, that's the best I could find in a Charger game since 2008.
Wow.
The best Chargers offensive line performance in 16 years.
Wow.
Only 3 pressures allowed all day. 4 of the 5 guys graded over a 79. So not just those 2. Everybody but the center, Bradley Bozeman, graded over a 79, and he was somewhere in the mid-high 60s.
Harbaugh, baby.
This is a real story. This is a real story, and I know it's the Panthers, but they played really well last week. You mentioned Joe Alt last week. Honestly, I thought he was the safest pick in the draft, and Jim Harbaugh clearly felt so too, because this offensive line is doing everything that they envisioned. They're running the ball. You got J.K. Dobbins rolling. You're going to get into that, but Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, these guys, they have stars up front. The amount of talent on their offensive line tells you they should probably be a top 5 or 6 unit, and they've played like it through 2 weeks, and they were just this, again, one of the best O-line performances for the Chargers in PFF history. Those 5 guys and what Jim Harbaugh has, and Greg Roman, I should say, too, have them doing up front. Wait till Justin Herbert gets it going. Because if they're going to protect like this and they're going to run the ball like this, they're just figuring it out with all the young weapons in the passing game. Quentin Johnston with 2 touchdowns yesterday. I mean,
he's not bad.
That's as big a turnaround as you can find in football. If they get him going, McConkey's been really good. But
it's true.
But Jim Harbaugh, they made a statement in the draft when they took Joe Alt that, look, we're going to have a really talented offensive line. We're going to block the hell out of people like Greg Roman and I always do, and we're getting after it. We're changing the culture of this Chargers team, and they're doing it up front.
It's why we talked about Jim Harbaugh as the best coaching hire of the cycle, because it was just he's just a good football coach. He understands this kid's game, if you will, better than a lot of other coaches out there. And so we figured that the turnaround for the Chargers was going to be a lot more swift than it was for some of these other teams. Champion with a super chat that we have on the show right now said, my Cardinals put the NFC on notice yesterday. Marvin Harrison Jr. out here looking like a young Randy Moss.
We're getting there.
Champion, we're going to get to the Arizona Cardinals. I promise you're going to enjoy the breakdown, because it wasn't just Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and Kyler Murray. I can't wait to get to his performance, because it was damn near historic what he was able to do this week. But my stat that told the story here for the Chargers at the Panthers, it's a Bryce Young one, and I hate being super negative, but I did think about this with Bryce, because over the last week, I was getting sad thinking about what he was at Alabama versus what he has been in the NFL. So I went back and I watched some old Alabama tape with Bryce. And specifically, part of his game at Alabama that made me feel like, hey, he could still do that at the NFL level was, I think we talk a lot about the middle of the field stuff when it comes to the shorter quarterbacks. Like, can they see over the offensive line? Are they going to be comfortable pushing the ball over the middle of the field? And that's definitely a talking point. But for Young now, what he was able to do at Alabama was he was also able to hit deep down the sideline with a lot of confidence. And not just a confidence, but anticipation. I guess that goes hand in hand. But when I watched a couple of games of him from his last year at Alabama, the way he's able to attack the sideline was poetic. It was so smooth. The anticipation was so phenomenal. It was part of what allowed everyone to think, man, what he is between the ears and how he sees the game, how slow the game comes to him, it's at a rare level, such a level that you would pick him as a size outlier for this position. And when I look at him now, that outside the number stuff doesn't exist.
It's like he's afraid to throw it.
He's afraid to throw it. And, defenders at the NFL level, They're a lot faster. They're a lot bigger. You've got to just kind of trust your guys there. He's not trusting his guys. When you look at Bryce Young, you can see the numbers on the screen right now. 19th in the NFL in attempts outside the numbers beyond 5 yards. So bottom half of the league in terms of starters. 20th in completion percentage outside the numbers. Third lowest passing grade outside of the numbers. You know, when you look at the pressures, I think a lot of people are like, man, the offensive line's not good. It's not helping him out. Right now, for a reasonable expectation, under 3 seconds, right? That you're holding the guy in front of you for under 3 seconds before he gets to the quarterback. Because the league average is, I think, right under 2.8. So I'm even taking that all the way to 3 seconds. They're 14th in the NFL. They're right around the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're catastrophically bad. Bryce the stat to me is that it's not, we like to focus on the middle of the field with short quarterbacks. It's not just the middle of the field. His bread and butter at Alabama was anticipation throws to the sideline, and he won't do it. And I think that that's kind of a wide receiver problem, but at this point, it's also a lack of confidence, and Bryce Young doesn't trust himself to hit those throws.
Yeah, and this is I'll stick with Young as my most disappointing part of this game. It's last year I could make the excuses. Look, Adam Thielen's their only receiver, and there's no interior protection. I think that's the second straight week that we've had Robert Hunt as their best player. They're protecting well. I mean, to the point. Their offensive line.
Well enough.
I mean, Bryce Young was only pressured 13.8% in this game, which is an elite number, and the problem is now a 46.6 clean pocket passing grade, which you just can't have it. So it's and only one positive. Trevor, you only had one positively graded throw all day, and it was a slant on 4th and 2.
Damn, I didn't realize that.
When you isolate it and you go, yeah, the Panthers, it's good enough. And in this game, look, you're only getting pressured 1 out of 7 times. You should tee off. I mean, imagine Burrow or Stroud or somebody with that type of protection. This now, through 2 weeks, looks like a more isolated issue with Bryce Young. Last year,
Yeah.
I could blame the entire offense. I could blame the coaching mess, the interior offensive line. But this now, if they're protecting him, and again, we'd have to evaluate the receivers and different things like that. But you're right. It looks like even in a clean pocket, he's afraid to throw the football.
Yep. And again, it's I don't want to have the same conversation about the Panthers every single week. I really don't. But this was also why hiring Dave Canales this offseason was like, okay, he better be the guy. Because he doesn't have have the resume.
I think we would have said that of anybody, though.
Yeah, but
they weren't getting Harbaugh.
No, and obviously, but like if you get Harbaugh, it's a different story. But like that's kind of what I'm saying is that I don't know if they made the wrong decision here, but because I don't know if they would have really been able to get probably the guy that they wanted in Harbaugh. If Harbaugh is there, though, that's sort of what I'm saying is that you can deal with the struggles, but Harbaugh has the track record to, like, you know what he's capable of. You know that he has done it with multiple quarterbacks before at every level of the game. So that's where Canales learning this head coaching thing for the first time is difficult. And I think that they felt like they avoided that problem with Frank Reich, and then that turned out to be a disaster. So I do feel bad for Carolina, just their situation overall. But Bryce is just mental confidence at this point. It's literally the number one thing.
Yep.
It's the number one thing. Who's the most impressive for you?
I'm going on the Chargers defensive side real quick, and a guy you picked for your breakout player for this team, and I'm actually going to go with 2, but I'll start with Diane Henley at linebacker and also Denzel Perriman. Junior Colson got hurt in this game. They'd kind of been rotating all 3 of them, but he got hurt early in this game, but Henley and Perriman were just spectacular, and Henley, maybe this is the start of the breakout that you were looking for. A 90.5 overall grade, allowed 3 catches for just 13 yards in coverage. Both of them were fantastic in coverage. Perriman only allowed 1 catch for 1 yard with a 90.8 coverage grade, 2 stops. They had problems like the Chargers. There's several problems Jim Harbaugh is fixing right now. The offensive line was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Running back situation was one of them. You're getting there. Linebacker was another one.
Front seven overall.
Front 7 overall. But the previous regime, especially kind of whiffing on Kenneth Murray, who's now in Tennessee. That was a first-round pick. Diane Henley, Denzel Perriman, and when he's been in there, Junior Colson's been good too. He got hurt in this game, but these 2 linebackers I was really impressed with. They were really, especially the way they played together, kind of in lockstep. They always they know where each other is at all times, and they're fitting the right gaps and they're doing everything right in the run. And Perriman struggled a little bit more in the run game. That was more of Henley's thing, but both great in coverage and both playing really well overall.
Man, and my most impressive, another fantastic week for J.K. Dobbins. And I just want to give him his flowers because, you go through as many injuries as he's been through in his career. For him to do something that has not been done with the Chargers franchise since the great LaDainian Tomlinson, and that is rush for back-to-back 130-yard performances.
Jet legend LaDainian Tomlinson.
Jet legend LaDainian Tomlinson. Yes, I will give it to you. What he did in week 2, it wasn't quite as individually impressive when it comes to missed tackles forced per attempt or yards after contact, but it was still damn good. And I think that's what I want to recognize here for J.K. Dobbins. So I feel like they got a really good one. Mine most disappointing, real quick, Panthers defensive line. Even outside of the offense, not one defensive lineman on the team had a run defense grade above 60. Now, of course, when you give up 130 yards to one rusher, you figured that's going to be the case. But we talked about how tough this might be for them without Derek Brown. It is proving, in the short term, to be very tough. Not a single defensive player in the front seven having or I think it's just the defensive line, having a run defense grade above 60. It starts there. It has to 100% start there, or you're not going to have success anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that Derek Brown injury is devastating.
Yep.
It's just you could argue easily that's their best defensive player, and you lose a guy like that in the middle when you're so dependent on him. It's a problem. They have multiple problems on their team right now that it's hard to see how they get fixed without significant improvement from the guys who are there.
Yeah. From one trenches to the other, one that we're kind of talking about in a bad way, and we're going to flip sides to one that we're talking about in a good way. The New Orleans Saints, man. So I don't mean this as any insult. The surprise team of the season so far, 2 weeks in, for what they have been able to do in these back-to-back 2 weeks. First week, they played Carolina Panthers at home. They give them a good shellacking, and you go, okay, well, it's kind of the Panthers. But then they bring the Dallas Cowboys on to it. Well, actually, they traveled to Dallas. This is a road game for them, 44-19. They put them on them in this game. So when you look at some of the top fives for the Saints, I mentioned how the trenches for the Panthers was bad and that New Orleans is going to be good. We're talking about elite. Look at these top two guys for the New Orleans Saints. Guard Lucas Patrick, 97.2. Eric McCoy, 92.2. That's beautiful stuff right there. Demario Davis coming in at number 3 with a 91.4. Chris Olave a 91.0. Edge rusher Carl Granderson, 85.6. And then Derek Carr adding another elite score to the list at a 91.0. Again, one of the pleasant surprise stories that we have had in the NFL 2 weeks into the season. When you flip to the other side for the Dallas Cowboys, Micah Parsons at the top of this list, 86.2. Tight end Luke Shoemaker with a 76.5 at number 2. Guard Zach Martin with a 74.9. Chauncey Golson, 72.1. Coming in at number 4, and then Tyler Smith, a 68.8. Dak Prescott, 53.3 overall grade here. I'll start with this one, Dalton, because I think it's the right transition here, talking about the offensive line. My stat that told the story has to be how well the Saints' offensive line is playing. Because when I looked at this team going into this season, I looked at a lot of question marks that they had. I figured that Eric McCoy was going to continue to be good. But what were you going to have at basically all of the other 4 spots? And 2 games into the season, one against a bad defensive line in the Panthers, but then another against one of the best defensive lines in the NFL in the Dallas Cowboys, you've got 2 games with a high level of success. Trevor Penning was the only offensive lineman below a 65 passing grade. It's impressive. It's really good for that unit. 89.7 run blocking grade as a team this past week. And then, like we mentioned, Lucas Patrick and Eric McCoy having elite run blocking grades. That, to me, is the stat that told the story. Derek Carr, his numbers are fantastic, extremely successful. I believe I saw a stat that every single time that the Saints offense has been on the field so far this season, they have scored points. But to me, it is the story of the offensive line for them and the massive turnaround that has been that is allowing this offense to truly hit a ceiling that we thought could be possible for them last season, and what made last season so disappointing for them. Now we're seeing it come to fruition in New Orleans.
To see their biggest concern become this much of a strength is incredible. And you look through it, if you go through and you filter in for offensive linemen, offensive lines, and which team leads the NFL in overall grade, their offensive line, it's the Saints. You see all the usual suspects, Philly and Minnesota and San Fran and Detroit and all the other good ones. The Saints are number 1, their offensive line in overall grade in the NFL right now. This not even through 2 weeks would I have guessed that that's happening. But I think there's also a piece of this where, one, I think it is a line that leans towards run blocking a bit. Penning's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. McCoy, the same thing. Maybe Cesar Ruiz, the same thing. But look, the combination of what's going on there, and then again, we mentioned it last week, Clint Kubiak with this play action game. Man, oh man. Derek Carr in this game, I got him 7 of 11 for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns and a 90.9 play action passing grade. This is just, you can see what they're doing right now is, so last year they were a big 11 personnel team, right? They still had Michael Thomas. They were trying to force him out there, even though he had the injury problems and all the money and everything going on with that. He goes, and you have now a group of tight ends, and you have Chris Olave and you have Rashid Shaheed. Mm-hmm. And they're running a lot more 12 personnel. They're running these tight ends. You got 3 versatile tight ends with Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau and the king of versatility, Taysom Hill. So whatever you want to call, he's listed as a tight end, but whatever you want to call him, you can call him. But those are the players that they're using right now. Those are the personnel sets, and what they're creating in play action, in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, it's lethal right now, especially if they're going to run block like that. So Clint Kubiak right now is in his wheelhouse, and is in the wheelhouse of every Shanahan coach that's in the league or has been in the league. His dad, Gary, which is just spectacular, did the same thing for all those years, especially with Baltimore. Mm-hmm. They're the masters of using tight ends and using play action and doing all those things, and Carr is responding in the biggest way. And I'm going to skip to my most impressive here real quick as it goes with the passing game. How about Rashid Shaheed? Second straight game with a 50-plus yard touchdown, 4 catches, 96 and a touchdown. And I think that speed threat, you have that guy, because Olave is one of the best intermediate receivers in the league, one of the 2 or 3 best.
I think you do it all, but yes, to your point, yes.
But this is just what the numbers have shown us through the first 2 years. Is in that intermediate range, he's one of the 2 or 3 best. He's up there with Brandon Ayuk is up there, Justin Jefferson. Well, he's up there on every board.
I put Chris Godwin up there too.
We'll get there. Don't you worry with Chris Godwin. But Shaheed takes the top off, and he started to do it last year. Look, the last 2 years he's tied for the league lead in deep receiving grade, perfect 99.9. And I would guarantee, I haven't looked at that, but I guarantee he's doing it again after the first 2 weeks. And you were playing around with a graphic yesterday that I think had him side by side with Deshaun Jackson.
Young Deshaun Jackson, baby.
That's high praise.
It is.
But that's what he's doing for this offense right now. For him to take the top off. If you go single high and you want to load the box, I don't know if there's many corners in the league that could run with Rashid Shaheed.
Right.
If any. He's blazing fast, and Carr is letting it rip when he's getting down the field one-on-one. This is a guy who really balances their offense, and I'm super impressed through 2 weeks.
No, he has been awesome. My most impressive, I'll go with Alvin Kamara. I didn't know how much juice he had left in the tank. And look, when you're running behind an offensive line like that, it gets a little bit easier to do. But Kamara, what do you have, 4 touchdowns on Sunday?
I believe so, yeah.
65 receiving yards, 115 rushing yards. It's just, again, it's not like his PFF grades aren't world beating. Obviously, we didn't see him in the top 5 there. It's because the offensive line's doing a lot of the work for him. But still, now you have a veteran, aware back who knows how to capitalize when the offensive line is playing well. And so when that is the case, then obviously you're getting that. I did want to just go back to your Kubiak point really quickly. When we were going through our division previews, and we were talking about the New Orleans Saints, I remember looking up this number specifically. The Saints last year, they ran play action one of the least amounts in the NFL. They just did not do it very often. The 49ers, with Clint Kubiak as their pass game coordinator, they didn't run play action a ton, but they were the number 1 graded team in the NFL in terms of EPA per pass and PFF passing grade when coming off of play action, when using play action. This year, guess who the number 1 PFF passing grade team is off of play action? It's the New Orleans Saints. So what we talked about for a team preview for them is coming to fruition immediately. They're running more play action, but it's not just more play action, better play action.
Working.
And that is what Kubiak is very good at. So you got to give him his props here. Most disappointing in this game before we move on, Cowboys run defense. We know that this unit can really get after the passer. They got a lot of guys who can get after the passer, obviously highlighted by Micah Parsons. But through the first 2 weeks, run defense is not their forte. 45.3 run defense grade in week 1, 34.3 run defense grade in week 2, so it was even worse. Oso Odigizua, Mozzie Smith, DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, all of them, not good run defense grades. These are guys that got to be able to show up for you, especially some of those interior guys there.
Agreed. Mozzie's the one for me because I watched all his tape last year, and he struggled through last year, struggled to get on the field. When he was on the field, that's a guy they drafted in the first round for that exact problem, because this has been a problem for a couple of years for them.
Right.
Mozzie's a guy they need to find a way to turn it around with him. Lawrence is going to bounce back. DeMarcus Lawrence, one of the best run defenders in the league. Eric Kendricks has had a long history of being good in run defense, but Mozzie Smith is a young guy. They really need to emerge in year 2, because that's exactly why they drafted him. The year before, last year, they were like, okay, we need a run defender. Let's take this really athletic guy from Michigan, Mozzie Smith.
Right.
And it didn't quite work last year, and it was just bad enough that he couldn't find his way onto the field in a starting role, even though there's not a ton in front of him. But Mozzie's the one that would concern me the most.
If you can't defend a run, you're not going to get on the field.
Yeah. No,
especially
for this team, it's already a problem.
Right.
I mean, it's been a problem for a couple of years. For me, I have the Dallas secondary too. I know Deron Bland is out, but I expected better than this. They had combined their secondary, they had a 28.6 coverage grade, and I know again, Deron Bland's a superstar, set the record for pick sixes, all that, but I still have Trayvon Diggs.
It should be better than that.
It should be better.
The floor should be higher than that.
There is a part of it, too, Trev, that looks like Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer run very, very different defenses. And there is a part of it, too, that looks like they are struggling to adjust to a new defense. Because Dan Quinn was very single high, relatively simple, a lot of 1 and 3. Zimmer likes to mix it up more and change up looks and throw safeties around different places. And it looks like a secondary that is both struggling to adjust to a new system. So they have time to get it back together, but they need to be better than they were in this game for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned that we get to Chris Godwin. We can get to Chris Godwin now. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. The Buccaneers coming up with a huge win in Detroit, where their season ended a year ago in the playoffs, getting a little bit of revenge there. 20-16, really close game all the way around. When you look at this team, let's look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers first, and it is Chris Godwin, whose name is at the very top of this list for their top 5 graded players, a 90.0 grade for Chris Godwin. Defensive tackle Vita Vea, who has a grade 2 MCL sprain. He's going to miss a couple of weeks there. He's at number 2 on the list, 79.5. So he played enough in this game to get recorded into the top 5, but it's going to be questionable for him how much time he misses moving forward. Bucs are already down a couple of defensive starters, so it is worth monitoring. Number 3, cornerback Zion McCollum, coming up in a big way, getting an interception, 78.6 grade at number 3 there. Safety Jordan Whitehead had a really great game himself. No Antoine Winfield Jr. next to him, so he had to kind of pick up the responsibility there, 74.4 grade. Linebacker KJ Britt with a 72.4, and then Baker Mayfield a 56.5. But honestly, it was kind of the Baker Mayfield experience where it was a lot of good, a lot of bad. But, man, those highs for Baker Mayfield were big-time moments for this.
You come out of there with a win, it's a high.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, again, that's obviously a mediocre grade, but getting out of there, and he's gritty. I mean, is there a grittier player?
No.
At least quarterback, but is there a grittier player in the NFL right now than Baker Mayfield?
No, he's as gritty as it gets.
Just competing the same thing we just talked about with Minshew, but Mayfield, he just gives you everything he has, win or lose. It's incredible to watch, and the way they're synced up with this offense right now. Look, the Bucs look like they can contend for a division title again. This is through 2 weeks. Is this better than they looked at any point last year?
No, they look even more confident this year, even with some starters down. But okay, so for Detroit now, getting to their top 5s, edge rusher Aiden Hutchinson, he's at the top of the list, a 90.9 grade. Now, people might be wondering why this isn't a 99.9 because he had 4.5 sacks in this game. Well, the Bucs didn't have Luke Gedeke in this game, so the tackle competition that he was up against was not exactly
it was dominant.
Stout in this one.
Make no mistake, it's hard to get a perfect grade, but Hutchinson, he tried to will him to a win.
He really did.
Felt like almost by himself at times.
He certainly stat-stuffed his Defensive Player of the Year candidacy here in this past game. Brian Branch, their safety, with an 86.1 overall grade in this game at number 2. Number 3, Kevin Zeitler, their offensive guard, 78.8. Number 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown with a 76.3. Ended up leaving the game on that final drive, but it looks like he's going to be okay long term. Offensive tackle Taylor Decker, 75.3 overall grade, and then Jared Goff, just a 49.0 grade. I know that we're going to talk about him in a little bit. I'm going to start with my stat that told the story, and it has a little bit to do with Jared Goff. I think some of our talking points here are going to be, a little bit of Goff here and there just to get to kind of what we're talking about. But Bucs defense versus the deep passes here for the Detroit Lions. To me, that's what I was really worried about with this team, right? Because no Antoine Winfield Jr. You got a rookie playing in the slot in Tyke Smith or Christian Izien, but Christian Izien also has to play safety now because you didn't have Antoine Winfield Jr. Zion McCollum, he was in and out with concussion-like symptoms, so we didn't even know if he was going to play. You got Jamel Dean on the other side, which you feel good about, but Zion McCollum did not play well last year in coverage, and them telling him that he's going to start this year, or I guess I should say earning that starting role, there were some questions as whether or not that was going to stick in the NFL regular season, and they played really well, man. Bucs defense on passes of 10 or more yards down the field, they didn't give up anything. 2 interceptions, 5 forced incompletions. They even had another dropped interception. Only 7 completions on the 20 attempts that were 10 or more yards down the field. Coverage grade was top 10 this week with no Antoine Winfield Jr. in this category. That, to me, is the stat that told the story. Because I thought that with Winfield out of here, how Jamison Williams was playing, how Sam Laporta can play, how Jahmyr Gibbs can even play out of the backfield, what Amon-Ra St. Brown can do over the middle of the field in between the 10 and 20 range in particular. I thought this was going to be a tough week for Tampa to really get together and cover these dudes, and they did it beautifully. And I think that, to me, is the stat that told the story of how well they played in that area without Winfield Jr.
I'm with you. Going into the game, again, it was a matchup of 2 good teams. But if you're down Winfield, you could argue Winfield's the best player on their entire team. He's at least in the argument. That was the biggest concern I had, too. And the Lions, look, you had every right to be worried going into this, especially without Winfield, right? But the Lions, look, the one for me is they didn't finish drives. Only 1 touch, 7 trips to the red zone, only 1 touchdown. And I am sure Dan Campbell just absolutely prides himself on finishing drives. You know how that Lions team is. That just can't happen. I mean, look, you get into red zone, and their team offense grade was a 52 on plays that they ran inside the plus 20. You have to finish drives. The Lions had every single opportunity to win this game. Your best pass rusher had 4.5 sacks. They only gave up 20 points. They were driving down the field, it seemed, at will at times. They didn't get the deep shots, but they were methodically getting there. They were getting to the red zone, and then it would just stall for various reasons. So, look, the Lions, they're going to come out of this one kicking themselves, especially at some point down the line if this were to cost them playoff seeding. This was a huge win for the Bucs, but the Lions have to feel like one got away from them here. Just you cannot go. You are not going to win a whole lot when you go 1 for 7 in the red zone. You have to. The difference, especially in the NFL, of winning and losing games is finishing drives.
Yeah, and for the sake of conversation, I'll get to my most disappointed right now, and it is Jared Goff, and not just him, but also like Ben Johnson as well. To your point, sort of how they were not able to finish drives, I think that's more of a Ben Johnson issue here. But I'm watching Jared Goff throughout that game. There's plays where
something's off.
He's not willing to give his guys the ball and just give them a chance to go make a play. Like there was one screenplay, I think it was while they were in the red zone, where the Bucs sort of read it well,
and he spiked
and
it.
He immediately just throws it in the ground. It's like, dude, you could have gotten that to Gibbs and at least given him a chance to be the playmaker. And yesterday we've talked about how poorly Goff can sometimes play under pressure, right? How much the passing grade really drops when he is under pressure. To me, yesterday almost made it look like Ben Johnson and Jared Goff have this understanding that, like, if there is anything that is not perfect at all, just throw it away. Just throw it in the dirt. We'll go live the fight another day. Don't put the ball in harm's way. And I can sort of understand that philosophy because you don't want to give the ball to the other team, certainly. You don't want to have a turnover where you play there. But at the same time, this is the NFL. If you never give your guys the opportunity to go make a play, you're not going to win enough football games against the best teams to go up and win a Super Bowl. So the mentality was off yesterday. I mean, look at that last throw, for example. The game's on the line. I mean, did they have a chance? Yes, the chance was slim. It looked like they might have been setting up like a hook and ladder. Goff didn't even get it to the receiver. He threw it 3 yards short. Dude, you got to give your guy a chance. How many times did we see that yesterday where he did not give his guys a chance to go make a play?
A lot.
And it's not like this is always who Jared Goff is, but this is what worries me about him as a quarterback, is that when things aren't perfect for him, it's not that he doesn't have the ability to hang tough, but it's almost like a mentality where he just goes, nope, we're killing this play. We're killing this play immediately. And it's like, there's just not enough perfect plays that exist in the NFL, especially for an offensive coordinator that's in his 3rd year in one spot, because this league figures you out. That's what worried me about Ben Johnson is I think everybody went into this year. And look, I had the Lions winning the Super Bowl, so I don't want people to be like, oh, this dude's a hater. I had them winning the Super Bowl, but something that really worried me about this was it's year 3 of Ben Johnson in the same spot with basically the same weapons. It's not to say that he can't have success, but I think defenses, the longer you are in a certain spot, they're going to figure you out, and they're going to start to throw things at you that you weren't ready for. And it just felt like Todd Bowles down 3 defensive starters in this game, made Ben Johnson and Jared Goff uncomfortable. And I think that's worrisome moving forward. Not a panic button in any way, shape, or form, but worrisome and why it was disappointing for me.
And Todd Bowles is a guy who can manufacture production out of his defense, too, with all the looks and all the blitzes and things like that. And I think to your point, I'll go with a quick most disappointing because I think you hit it all with the Lions offense. But Sam Laporta, too, we need to get this guy the ball. He had 2 catches for 13 yards, both of them career lows. He didn't have a game like that last year. I think last year the low might have been 14. But either way, we can't have Sam Laporta out here setting career lows in yardage. And through 2 games, he's got 4 catches. 4 catches in 2 games for Sam Laporta.
That's got to be more.
Who, honestly, is he not a top 5 tight end in football? I mean, and I know they have a ton of weapons, and Jameson's been hot, but Laporta's the guy who can take an easy completion and work either after the catch or work to the chains and do all those things. It's a little confusing to me why he's not more involved so far.
Yeah. Most impressive.
Oh, it's Chris Godwin. I got to go with him. I got to go with him 2 weeks in a row.
Go off.
The same. To be honest, it's the same thing as I mentioned before with like Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, where you know who Mike Evans is. You know what he does. He's 6'5", and one-on-one, they're going to throw him the football. The hardest part of this offense, the same thing to defend, is Chris Godwin and even Jalen McMillan going in motion and creating weird matchups that you don't want pre-snap. And I'm talking like right as the snap is happening, essentially. There's exit motions, there's stuff coming across, there's stuff where it's bunched, but Chris Godwin right now is the biggest beneficiary, and he's making plays. The combination of Liam Cohen finding ways to get him open and then his natural ability taking over, he was really the only consistent threat for the Bucs in this game. 7 catches for 117 yards and 87.6 receiving grade. This is a very difficult offense right now to defend with Godwin playing like this.
Yep.
And Jalen McMillan is going to find more targets in future weeks because those 2 guys are very much involved in all of the motion and all of the pre-snap, the window dressing. And then you just have times when, look, they know when the adjustments are made and all of a sudden press man is coming. Well, then they'll just ISO Mike Evans and they'll just let it rip. But right now, Liam Cohen's in his bag right now, honestly. And Godwin, by the numbers, has been the biggest beneficiary, but they are finding ways to utilize all their weapons. If he keeps playing like this is a really dangerous offense.
My most impressive player, I'll go to the other side for the Buccaneers. Here's their cornerback, Zion McCollum. Again, we talked about how much he needed to step up this year. He stepped up in a big way. You saw that he was in the top 5 graded players that we had on this team. I mean, he's a freak, right, athletically. There's no doubt about it. Over 6'2", 200 pounds, 98th percentile 40-yard dash, 95th percentile vertical jump, 97th percentile broad jump. But then you get into the agility stuff, too. 99th percentile 3-cone, 98th percentile 20-yard shuttle. And let me tell you, that stuff showed up on tape against the Detroit Lions. It's the reason why he got a pick, and it's why he made so many other plays on the ball as well, because he might not have the experience yet to be as in the hip pocket of receivers as he could be. But oh, baby, when he sees it, he fires downfield. He stops on a dime, and he gets his long arms in there for forcing completions, and this dude could be an absolute gem for them. And I think we got a really good taste of that this past weekend against a good passing team in the Detroit Lions. So Zion McCollum is getting my shout-out here. We got some breaking news that we're going to get to, even though we already talked about the Carolina Panthers. Yes, I see you in the chat. Yes, I see it on Twitter. We're going to get to it in a second. But you guys got to hang on because we got a word from our friends over at DraftKings. Whether it's a touchdown, a TD, a tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you want to call it. One thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings Sportsbook, it's that number one place to make that happen. If you are ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. In order to do that, just go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. If you are ready to do that, new DraftKings customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. We got a lot of really good matchups coming up next week. We got the Commanders at the Bengals here in Cincinnati next Monday night. If you think, hey, one way or the other. I'm big on the Commanders in this game. I'm big on the Bengals in this game. I think this player is guaranteed to score a touchdown. Throw some money on the line. Throw $5 on the line. You get 200 bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. The number one place to bet on touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook. Use the promo code PFF. That is promo code PFF for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, cdkng.co/FTBALL. I teased it there on the front side of the ad. Per Tom Pelissero, the Carolina Panthers are benching Bryce Young and are starting Andy Dalton this week. Now, obviously, this is no guarantee that Andy Dalton is going to be the starter for the rest of the season, but Dalton, it certainly opens the door. And, you know, we talked about what kind of a head coach Dave Canales is going to be. And as a first-time head coach, was he going to feel like he had the authority to really do what he needed to do to make the best moves for this team? And it's very clear that he does. Now, let's be very clear about this. He does not do this unless he talks to David Tepper himself and Tepper signs off on it, or even Tepper's the one who suggests it because he's tired of losing, because we know that he does not enjoy those things. What owner does? But what's your immediate thoughts here? Bryce is on the bench. It has looked very bad over the 1 year and 2 games that he has played. What do you think happens here for Bryce?
In the immediate, and why this is happening now. Again, I was a fan of the school of thought where it's like last year, leave it behind, because they had so many issues. The problem now is through 2 weeks. It's exactly what I just mentioned in clean pocket. He was only pressured 14% in this game, and he still didn't make the throws. If you have a guy in a good environment, it's almost why, Trevor, it's almost why PFF passing grade exists, is to try to isolate, okay, just what type of throws and decisions are quarterbacks making in a somewhat independent variable sort of sense, right? Because obviously everything's dependent in football. It's 22 dependent variables moving all at the same time on a football field. But if you're in a clean pocket, and if you have something of an open receiver, you as a quarterback become a whole lot more independent, and your own performance becomes a stable thing we can predict. Right now, with their offensive line playing better, and again, I'd have to go and check every single snap of the receivers to see it. I mean, I can't imagine with a better group, with Deontay Johnson and with Adam Thielen and with Xavier Legette and some decent time. I can't imagine everyone's blanketed on every single play. And to me, it doesn't look like it. I'm with you. It looks like he lacks for confidence. And if you lack for confidence, even when you're protected, it's a problem. If they give this protection that they gave yesterday to Andy Dalton, which was solid at the very least, right? And if he's only pressured 14% of the time, he's going to be living.
Right.
Andy Dalton will play well.
I know.
Because he's confident. He's a veteran. He's done it for, what, is he in his 14th season now, I think it is?
Is it 14?
I think wasn't it 2011?
Well, he's had a couple of opportunities for multiple teams where he's been able to come in and play well.
He had one start last year. He was very good.
Right.
I mean, Andy Dalton will not go in there and lack for confidence. He never has.
No.
He's going to go in there, and if they protect him like that, it's going to be. It feels like in these first 2 games, it's a more isolated Bryce Young problem now.
Yeah, and Andy Dalton was never going to sell tickets. Andy Dalton was never going to sell jerseys.
Guys named Dalton don't sell tickets.
Okay,
really? Come on now.
That's not where I was going. That's not where I was going. What are you making me out to be the bad guy out here?
I just had to throw it in there. It's like the only Dalton.
He's not selling season tickets. He's not selling jerseys. Bryce Young is. The Heisman Trophy winner is. The former Alabama quarterback is. That's sort of how you look at it from a face of the franchise perspective, and how all of this with quarterbacks gets very tricky. Because if you ask me, has Bryce Young ever been the best quarterback on the Carolina Panthers since he has been there? No, he hasn't, because they've had Dalton the whole time. So, at least I think they've had him the whole time, if I remember correctly.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, he was there the whole time last year,
I think he started in week 2 or 3.
Okay,
there was a game that Young missed.
He was there the whole year. So, Bryce Young's never been the best quarterback on that roster at any point in time. Now you get a little bit dangerous because
Well, you're in the Zach Wilson thing like the Jets were, where it's like
right.
we bench him and then we bring him back and then we bench him, and we're trying to play psychologist.
And I don't know. And obviously, like, I don't want to be a hyperbolic prisoner of the moment, because Dave Canales, I think, is going to be very open-minded about this. If Andy Dalton plays well and gives them a chance to win games, they're going to continue to go to him. If he does not, I don't think they're going to be afraid to go back to Bryce Young. But at that point, are you in a Zach Wilson situation where you have already chosen a quarterback over him, Aaron Rodgers with Zach Wilson, and then Aaron Rodgers gets hurt and you got to throw Zach Wilson out there, and it's so far gone? It feels like the most likely conclusion here is that Bryce is done in Carolina. I don't want to be too prisoner of the moment.
We very rarely see guys who get benched come back and then they're great. Usually it's something more like, say, Geno Smith or Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield,
where they go to another team
elsewhere.
Yes.
And it's no, you're right. It's unfortunate that we have to sit here and ask long-term questions about the Panthers in week 2, but that's where we're at, because it's now an isolated variable with Young. Their pass protection's been fine. They went and got weapons, right? And Bryce, like you said, it looks like it's everything you said in your stat. He looks like he's afraid to throw the football right now.
Yeah, I just
like if you're afraid to make a mistake, look, you have a Bryce Young who went number 1 overall, and you mentioned Gardner Minshew before, who was a 6th-round pick, and he's just not afraid of anything, and that's pretty much his best trait. That's big. At quarterback especially, you got to be a brave soul to play that position, and if you're not willing to at least take some sort of risk, that's what it looked like this week. Just every ball went 3 yards, and he just was unwilling to take the gamble of making any sort of mistake at all. You just can't have it.
I feel bad, man.
I do too. I mean, he's super talented. Everything we saw at Bama is in there somewhere, but if you don't have the confidence and you don't think you can do it, then you're probably not gonna. Quarterbacks that lack confidence don't get far.
Yeah. You just got to clone Kyle Shanahan and just have like 6 Kyle Shanahans around the league. You know what I'm saying?
There are.
No, but but Kyle Shanahan is still like, like he's still the king of it.
He's the Kyle Shanahan.
He's the Kyle Shanahan. Although Kevin O'Connell.
Kevin O'Connell. I'm going to tell you something about the next one, the next disciple we have in this next game. What a
beautiful transition that is here. Colts Packers? Are we going to the same game?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Colts Packers, next game that we're going to. We'll talk plenty about Bryce Young. Obviously, I think that as that situation goes on, we'll dig into it a lot more. But you guys are in the chat. Let us know. Do you think Bryce Young plays for the Carolina Panthers again? Or I think the way I should say it is Bryce Young on the Carolina Panthers roster to start next season? That's what I want to know. Let me know in the chat. Green Bay Packers take the dub against the Indianapolis Colts by a score of 16-10. Top 5 graded players on the Green Bay Packers as they were hosting this game. Javon Bullard up at the top of the list. Look at that, the rookie. You love to see it. 78.3. Running back Josh Jacobs next on the list, 77.2. Romeo Doubs, 74.4. At number 3, Dontavian Wicks at number 4. Helping out my fantasy team. Thank you, Mr. Wicks, for showing up this season. 73.9. Number 5, cornerback Jair Alexander, 70.7. And then Malik Willis, 69.6. Did enough. He did enough, Dalton. Flipping to the other side, he got the Indianapolis Colts. Will Fries, once again, the top-graded player. Now, it wasn't the 93 overall grade that it was last week, but 75.7. Number 2, Grover Stewart at 73.6. Wide receiver Alec Pierce at 72.8. Center Ryan Kelly at a 72.7. And then Odeingbo. That's how you say it. There you go, Trev. Get paid to do this. 71.3. Quarterback Anthony Richardson, not great. 43.6.
There's a gator.
Okay.
There he is.
Look, you got the first one earlier in the show. You didn't have to do that. What's your stat that told the story?
All right, so I know what I have in the sheet here is the time of possession, the 40 minutes and 11 seconds the Packers had. I'm doing a mini switaroo on you.
Please do, because my most impressive is Packers time of possession, so I will get to that.
I have another one that I found that I like even more.
Okay, let's hear it.
We watch games. We're upstairs watching games. I'm watching the Jets. We got Red Zone on. We got 8 million different things going. And this game was like never on Red Zone because no one was ever in the Red Zone. It was just like
That's
hard.
True.
Like, after like the first quarter, all of a sudden the Packer game had like 3 minutes left, and I was like, oh, I guess it's over. Okay, and the Packers won. Okay, cool. This was the most fun tape watch I had this week. Going back, watching it sequentially, okay? And I'm watching it, and I was like, what is this offense? Who is coaching this, right? Because it didn't look like a Shanahan disciple. I thought, Trevor, for reference, I was watching this, and I was like, I thought I was watching a Kansas State game from last Friday again. And for reference, here's where I'm going with this. Kansas State in college runs more gap scheme runs than any team in the country. All of a sudden, I'm looking at this. I'm like, why does this look like this? Matt LaFleur, the Packers, Shanahan thing, they're a zone team. Last year, they ran 36% of their run plays were gap runs. All right? Not a particular high rate. They're a zone team. In this game, 58%. Malik Willis went in there, and they changed their entire offense in a week, and they're pulling guards, and they're running counters, and they're influencing linebackers, and they're running options with Willis. Like, it's like in a week they built the perfect offense for Malik Willis. And then even the passing was just like, listen, dude, we're going to ISO up like one guy, and you're going to throw it to that guy. Okay, we're not making you do any full field, nothing. Just take a step and throw the football where we tell you to. Okay, but this run game all of a sudden was a whole different thing than usual. Like we saw them in the playoffs against the Cowboys last year. And it's just that same thing, outside zone, like Kyle Shanahan. That's what they've done forever, what all 12 Shanahan coaches in the league do all the time, right? They changed the whole program. They messed with everything the Colts thought was coming on defense. And yes, there is an element to it where physically they battered them. Obviously, Josh Jacobs was spectacular. 32 carries, 151 yards, 6 missed tackles. He was great. The team had 261 rushing yards. Malik Willis had a little bit of that. But the scheme change and breaking tendency, when I tell you, Trevor, they created like an entire new run playbook just for this game, just for Malik Willis to get in there and run this. I don't know if LaFleur knows like a Chris Kleiman, the head coach at Kansas State, or there's some other college teams that I don't know if he knows these guys, but it looked like he went to school for like 2 or 3 days and learned every gap scheme, triple option look and run that he could, and they just battered the Colts with it all day. And I could not believe what I was watching. This was for LaFleur, and I'm going to stick in the most impressive thing. I'm just going to take both windows real quick. LaFleur, and I'm going to Jeff Hafley too, new defensive coordinator, big variable this year.
Yep.
Mixing up looks on defense, and look, over his last 4 years at Boston College, highest rate of single high defenses in the country. Okay. Big adjustment there. He's more balanced with the Packers. I was curious if he was going to stay like that, like he was in college, because the NFL is a different game and certainly a different game than the ACC, right?
Yep.
Much more balanced. It's much more even when it comes to single high and two high looks, and it was a lot early in the game. No matter what look they were in, they knew, as long as we don't give up home runs to Anthony Richardson, we're just going to play this complimentary game.
Right.
We're going to manufacture what we can, and we're going to make them manufacture what they can underneath. The combination of this was the best coach game I've seen so far this year out of anybody. It was spectacular.
Yeah, and I think, that's a fantastic point. The time of possession is what I wanted to point out because it's egregious. It's like 41 minutes for the Packers and
40 to 20, yeah,
and 19 for the Colts. Yeah, basically like 40 to 20, which is crazy. I mean, that just means you are running the ball at will. And I think my most disappointing, we can go all around here because it's just a couple of points that I want to make. My most disappointing was the Colts' run defense because they missed 10 tackles this past week, so they weren't helping themselves out in that regard. But the Packers were also, like you said, kind of giving them a run flavor they weren't used to.
Yep.
And I think that's really, really important and shows you got a good coach in that regard who is willing to do something like that and has the ability and the acumen to be able to adjust. That also shows that you have the right roster in place for guys that are able to be flexible like that. But so those are my most impressive, my most disappointing, kind of like went hand in hand with sort of what you were saying there. Stats that told the story, though. Anthony Richardson's completion percentage to me, 62.5 completion percentage in week 2, adjusted completion percentage, so it takes drops into account. And then just a 50% completion percentage last week when everybody was like, ooh, Anthony Richardson, it was just a 50% adjusted completion percentage. Last year, the league average was 75%. He's not even close. He's not even close to it. And the problem is that I think Richardson's supremely talented. He makes throws that very few quarterbacks can make. But the league and defenses are trending in a direction that is very anti-Anthony Richardson. They're trending to much more towards those quarter, half defenses that can defend deep really well, or at least those too high deep safety looks that can defend those deep passes really well, and they dare you to be patient enough to do something underneath. And not only do I feel like Anthony Richardson doesn't see those throws as well, he does not complete those throws well. In order to beat these defenses in the way that Indianapolis would need to beat them, you either need to run the ball at an incredibly high clip to start getting the defense to rotate safeties down and really be able to attack them over the top, or you've got to be nickel and diming them up the field so efficiently that they have to adjust somewhere, and then you hit them over the top. Richardson's game right now is not conducive to being able to do that. And I'm really worried about the Colts, because for as much as Richardson might give us some throws that are going to be some of the best throws that we have seen this year, I don't know how much it's actually going to contribute to them winning football games because of where defense is and where the league is right now and what they are asking quarterbacks to do.
I completely agree. Look, I think with Richardson, it's a delicate balance between his talent and being able to just complete passes. And they ran the ball well. Considering they had the ball for less than 20 minutes, they ran the ball well, yes. Jonathan Taylor, but Jeff Hafley and the Packers, they didn't care. We're going to keep – go ahead, hand it off every play. Don't care, right? Here's the thing I like to do, actually, when evaluating college quarterbacks, because the college game is so screen-heavy and all that stuff. I like to filter out completion percentage and take the screens out of it, right? Because those are you hit 99 to 100% of them. Right now, Richardson's completing only 46% of his non-screen passes. All right, and anytime I found a quarterback that is hitting under 50, it's a huge problem. Okay, and just not being able to complete enough passes just to move the chains. Because, you mentioned the time of possession. We've talked about the Packers' run game. The Colts' 4 drives in the first half were 3 punts and a fumble. They just don't keep the chains moving. And the weird part is I'm starting to think about this now. The other thing, too, I'll get to is accuracy real quick. 31.4% of his passes this year have been charted by PFF as uncatchable. It's the second highest rate behind Bryce Young. So you have a Bryce Young level of accuracy, but obviously he's a way better athlete with a better arm who can stretch the field. That's certainly Richardson's not fearless. But in a game like this, you have to move the chains. The Packers have chosen the pace that they want to play this game at. You have to move the chains and sustain drives. And you can't have 5 turnover-worthy plays. So Richardson, the part I'm struggling with is the highest bit of optimism for me is he has Shane Steichen. Great play caller, right? Mm-hmm. But a huge part of Steichen's offense with the RPOs and the way it works is just getting first downs. We saw that with Gardner Minshew last year. The grades weren't particularly high, but we're like, okay, why are they breaking the code and the grades being low, but they're winning games? So they just get just enough for first downs. Richardson doesn't have that in him right now to just be content to just not throw a 105-mile-an-hour fastball, and just sustain drives. There's so much of Steichen's offense that's just about sustaining drives, and they don't do that. So the time of possession thing works both ways for me in this game. It's a legitimate question right now how they can sustain offense if he's only going to complete that low a number of passes.
Look, we've already got some Niners Vikings people in the chat. We're getting to that next. Not immediately next. We have a game on the sheet that we have to get to first, but I'm just letting you know it's coming up, so don't leave. The Cleveland Browns at the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the one that we have next on the sheet. Cleveland coming away victorious 18-3. Another sort of stinker of an offensive performance here for the Jags, which I know we will get to. On Cleveland's side of things, wide receiver Jerry Jeudy was the highest graded player at an 80.8. Offensive tackle DeJuan Jones earned a 76.0. Safety Ronnie Hickman with a 75.4, and then his running mate Rodney McLeod, the other safety, 71.9. Cam Mitchell with a 71.5 to round things out. Deshaun Watson, 72.2, so a better week there for Deshaun Watson. On the flip side of things, the Jacksonville Jaguars, edge rusher Joshua Hines Allen, elite 92.1. Linebacker Devin Lloyd, 86.2. And then we start to drop off a little bit. Running back Travis Etienne, 74.8 at number 3. Cornerback Ronald Darby at a 73.6. Foyesei Oluokun, their edge rusher, 70.5. And then quarterback Trevor Lawrence with a 67.5 in this game. I think our stat that tells the story, as I'm looking at the sheet now, it's going to kind of go into one another, but I'll start with you. What is your stat that told the story here, with this one being a Cleveland Browns low-scoring victory in Trevor Bank Stadium?
Trevor Bank Stadium, that's right. And I think this offense, I know they have Gabe Davis and they have Brian Thomas and they have Trevor Lawrence's huge arm, but this is another one. Very much like the Colts, we got to manufacture things sometimes. And we know they struggle to run block, and we know it's very inconsistent running the ball, but this is a team right now not creating a whole lot after the catch, not creating a whole lot themselves to move the chains. Look, and Trevor Lawrence, he hit 4 deep balls yesterday, which is good, but the highest average depth of target in his career at 13.4 yards. And right now, same thing as the Colts. If you're getting too home run dependent and you're playing a team like the Browns, who are one of the better teams in the league at preventing explosive plays, you have to manufacture it. I think, Trev, Evan Ingram being called out of this game about an hour before the game, that really hurt him. Because they need, and I'm going to roll this real quick into my most disappointing with it. You have Davis and Thomas as the vertical threats, right? But a big part of this offense, along with ETN doing what he does in the backfield, is Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram moving the chains. On third down, just those two creating the easy throws. And there's not enough easy throws. Christian Kirk had 3 targets with 1 catch for -1 yard. And through 2 weeks, he's got a 52 receiving grade. They can't win if they're just trying to swing for the fences all of the time. They need Christian Kirk. Obviously, I know Brenton Strange had a good game, but he doesn't. I think that was like a career game for him. The whole point of this is that you have Davis and Thomas deep and Kirk and Ingram underneath. And right now, with Ingram hurt, Kirk has to pick up that load. And they're just, as a team, it's the same thing as the Colts to me. They are just not creating enough first downs.
No.
I get the big shots, but you don't get big shots constantly, especially on a defense like this. Trevor Lawrence from 1 to 19 yards was 6 for 16. You just can't. You have to find ways to move the chains, especially, you've been mentioning it, the way that defenses are sitting back. Getting first downs has to be a primary goal. You don't need an 80-yard touchdown every play.
You know, the frustrating thing, I think, for the Jags, and look, I'll put on my coaching hat. I'll put down my analytics hat, and I'll pick up my coaching hat and I'll put it on. And I'll say it because I think that this is true in this instance. They just got to play better. They have to execute better.
Yeah.
Do they have the perfect team on paper? No. And I think that there are things that you could point to, and there's players that you could point to and say like, oh, this person's got to play better. And there's no doubt about it. But the frustrating thing for the Jags is that they have enough to win. We saw them go on winning streaks even with last year. But John Shipley pointed this out on Twitter. They're 1-7 in their last 8 games going back to last year. In those games, they have scored 21 points only 3 times. They just can't score. And the problem is that if it's not one thing, it's the other. If it's not the run game, it's the passing game. If it's not the blocking, it's the receivers. If it's not the receivers, it's the run game. If it's not the blocking, it's the quarterback. The problem is that it is always something with Jacksonville.
It's a theory I've had actually with the on the college show with the Clemson Tigers, where they have this problem where 10 guys do their job and 1 doesn't, and that's the one guy that ruins the play. And the Jags, you're right. And here's my other thing too. Are they lacking? I know it's a word that's used a lot. Are they lacking in identity? Like what are the Jags?
They want to pass deep. They want to be a vertical passing offensive team.
But you can't do that every play. This isn't college. Like there are teams in college that can do that every play because they have better athletes. What are they great at? Like, I love Trevor Lawrence. I do. I think he's a top 10 quarterback, maybe even top 8. He's as talented as any guy in the league. But what are we great at? And like you mentioned, what do we execute better than like take the Saints? Like, okay, we're great at play action, and we're gonna run it down your throat, and we're gonna get to play action, and that's how we're gonna beat you. Like teams have an identity. Like you can point with most of them and go, that's what they're great at. I don't know if I was to say, you'd be like, what's the best thing about the Jags? I'd be like, okay, I mean, like Hines Allen's really good, and Lawrence is sometimes really good.
Right.
But there's not like a full team thing. I can't even think of the word for it. That like an aspect of their team where you go, that's what I'm afraid of. Is there an identity?
No,
and
it's felt like that. And look, I looked up some of these things, and the more I looked up about the Jags offense, the more frustrating I got because it's pretty even all across the board. The offensive line has given up 9 pressures this year. That's 16th in the NFL, okay? It's dead even in the middle. 127 rushing yards. It's 17th in the NFL. Passing grade is it's a 60.8, which you might look at and be like, okay, that's really bad, but passing grades around the NFL are really down. So that's only 18th. That's right around the middle. Their third down conversion right now, 33%. That's a little bit lower than the middle of the pack because I think the middle was 38% last year. But it's like you have things there. It's just that something goes wrong every time. The Jags are either a team that is immensely hot for 6 to 8 games or they're terrible for 6 to 8 games. It sort of feels like, and it wasn't exactly to this extent, but like You remember the New York Giants when they were going on their Super Bowl runs. They were the poster child for this. You don't have to be good the whole year. Just get hot in December. That's all you need.
But you can't dig yourself too big a hole either.
Right? No.
This is a team now that's already 0-2.
Of course, but that's the frustrating thing for Jacksonville is they're capable of getting hot, but they're just an extremely hot and cold team right now under Doug Peterson and Press Taylor as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
It's just, again, if it is not one thing, it's another. I see so many great people who do a good job covering this team on the Twitter timeline. Somebody will point out Anton Harrison struggling. Somebody will point out Trevor Lawrence struggling. Somebody will point out Christian Kirk struggling. Somebody will point out Evan Ingram struggling. Somebody will point out Anton Harrison struggling. Or Cam Robinson struggling. And it's the problem is that it's something different every single time. There's just not continuity on this team, and it makes you want to rip your hair out because that's so frustrating that something goes wrong every time.
Because we've seen the highs.
Sure. Most impressive for me, he didn't play a ton of snaps. I think he only played 11 snaps in this game dealing with that shoulder injury, is Denzel Ward. But Denzel Ward's, this is more of a nod to how well he has been playing all season. When I say all season, I guess I mean 5 quarters. But he's been playing really, really well. You see this, it's only 11 snaps. He said he was sort of on a pitch count anyways, 90.4 overall grade, 1 pass breakup, 1 reception allowed. But like last week, he had a really good week as well. He's got an 82.4 coverage grade in the time that he has played already this season. So he's my most impressive and my most disappointing. I kind of got to it already. It's just Doug Peterson and Press Taylor not being able to get the most out of this team. But who is your most impressive here?
I actually went with the Browns quarterback, Deshaun Watson.
Wow.
It was better. It was at least better. It wasn't perfect. They didn't work it down the field vertically very much, but it was better, and I was impressed at least with his ability under pressure to not make any big mistakes and understanding what type of game this is. This is the type of game the Browns are going to need to win. It's 18-13. We got a safety at the end. We're pressuring Lawrence. Our defense is winning the game, but Watson under pressure, 10 of 15 for 104 yards and a big-time throw. That was the part, because there were moments in this game where he could have caved and he hung in there. Is it great yet? Absolutely not. But it's certainly better than we've seen in the last several games from Watson. Better than last week for sure. He at least, you know what? If they have to win running the ball and defense and playing games like this and being the same type of game manager, say that, I don't know, what Justin Fields is for Pittsburgh right now, then so be it. I think, again, we've talked about the days of superstar Deshaun Watson are probably gone. But if he can play like this, he at least gives him a chance.
Well, they keep running empty protection like he's a superstar because they run more empty protection than any team in the NFL.
That's why he was under pressure so much, and they don't have the most stable offensive tackle situation.
I was going to say, they got to figure that part out. The 49ers at the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings getting a huge home dub in this one, 23-17. Hell of a start to the season for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll start with them. Edge rusher Patrick Jones II. My man. I liked him coming out of the draft. 88.6 on the day. Center Garrett Bradbury an 84.4. Blake Cashman, their linebacker, at an 80.9. Justin Jefferson at 79.8. Christian Darrisaw rounding it out at number 5 with a 78.1. Sam Darnold a 69.5. Pretty nice there for him. San Francisco 49ers, their linebacker Fred Warner had one of the best games you'll see from a linebacker.
He was honestly the sole reason this game could have been a blowout.
Dude, he looked like Derek Brooks out there.
Yeah. If without Fred Warner, I think Minnesota wins this game by 17.
He was insane. 95.8 overall grade in this game. Just unbelievable. Best linebacker in the NFL, and he proved it again this past weekend. Cornerback Deommodore Lenoir, 81.8. Offensive tackle Trent Williams with an 80.5 at number 3. Nick Bosa at number 4, 78.5. Tight end George Kittle with a 78.3 at number 5. And then Brock Purdy, a 61.2 on the day. Dalton, what is your stat that told the story here from this one?
It's about Brian Flores blitzing Brock Purdy. And
did you see the Purdy clip afterwards?
No. What is
Purdy literally goes up to it while they're doing, the handshakes and everything, midfield or whatever, and he goes up to Flores and he pats him on the shoulder and he goes, "That scheme is crazy, man." Yeah. And it was blowing up because I thought that was just very genuine from Brock Purdy, because he's his team lost, so he's obviously bummed, but he's smiling and laughing because he could not believe what he was seeing, and it's Brian Flores' defense at its best.
That's how the Vikings won this game last year too, right? And Brian Flores, not only is it crazy, it's crazy and not consistent week to week, and you don't know what you're going to get. So first of all, Brock Purdy versus the blitz. I got him at a 48.4 passing grade with 2 turnover-worthy plays. Okay, that's where this game was won. Is as the game went on late in the game, especially Brian Flores just kept sending them because that's what he does. He's a pressure type of defensive coordinator. But it was a little bit different than in the game last year. Last year's Vikings team, they ran a ton of zero. I mean, they sent 7 guys, all 6 and 7 guys, all of the time. I mean, you don't know which 7. You could have the entire defense line up on the line of scrimmage, and you don't know which ones are coming and not. This was a little bit different. It was blitz heavy, but it was like light blitz heavy. I don't think, is that like light heavyweight, like in boxing? I don't know. Anyway.
You're making up terms and letting you roll with it.
I'm making up terms right now. But this year, he went more of like zone blitz and 5-man rush and just making the Niners block one-on-one. And it wasn't awful up front, but there were enough moments where Purdy could feel it. Right, it was really more. I don't think the Niners' O-line was terrible in this game by any means. I think they had a decent game. Weren't as dominant as last week for sure, but Brock Purdy could feel it. He could feel that heat. But I also don't know that he read so well that it wasn't just constant zero blitz like last year, where you just had 7 guys coming and 4 in man coverage, and that's easy to see. This was much more zone blitz, dropping 6, kind of mixing it up, rotating some. Brian Flores, even though, because on the surface, he's going to blitz a lot. But the way he blitzed in this game was a hell of a lot different than it was in last year's game. Because you already know, if you come out against Kyle Shanahan and even Brock Purdy with the same looks twice in a row, they're going to kill you. They're going to find a way, right? And Flores mixed up the looks, and it was really the difference in the game for this Viking defense.
Yeah, and my most disappointing was, just to piggyback off of that, it was Purdy in this game, but it was, you talk about the blitz and the pressure that Brock Purdy had to deal with. Purdy wasn't even seeing the field correctly when there wasn't any pressure. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays in this game, which was the second most in the league for this week. None of them were when he was pressured.
Yeah.
None. It was none of his 3 turnover-worthy plays.
Yeah, it was just him. Like, if you watch him, like there were plays in the pocket like those where he's in the pocket and it's almost ironically the old Sam Darnold seeing ghost thing. Like, it's like he felt like he had to rush, but they weren't actually there. Like Flores just made him feel like he had to move fast.
Now, one of them,
incredible.
To be fair to Purdy, like one of his turnover-worthy plays, he threw the ball and it like slipped out of his hand. And technically that has to count as a turnover-worthy play because it ended up being a turnover-worthy play. But even the other 2, I watched them this morning, and there's not really pressure around him. Not that the pocket is perfect, but it's not legit pressure, and he just throws it into danger both times because he wasn't expecting the defenders to be there. So that is there. Most impressive for me is Fred Warner.
Has to be.
Through 2 games, 95.8 defensive grade to lead all defensive players in the NFL. Just an absolute monster. And my stat that told the story in this one, Vikings offensive line, man. They are. We thought that this was a good group going into the season. They are proving to be one of the best offensive lines in the season. 80.4 overall grade this year, which is 4th highest in the NFL. 9th in the league in terms of pressures yielded before 3 seconds. So, understandable. The reason why we do that is because once you get past 3 seconds, it's like, okay, if you give up a pressure after 3 seconds, quarterback kind of has to get rid of the ball at that point. Like it's sort of a broken play. It's not exactly how you drew it up, as they say. So that Vikings offensive line, I think, is the stat that tells the story because every week, including against a really good 49ers defensive line, they were up to the task. And as long as that offensive line is playing the way they are in run blocking and pass blocking, very clearly they can compete with anybody.
Yeah, I'm going to match you up with that with my most disappointing, then I'll go back to impressive. The 49ers run defense, and I mentioned to you in our 49ers preview that since Talanoa Hufanga got hurt last year, this run defense has not been the same. And in the interior, if you're going to attack this 49er defense anywhere, it's in the interior. Had a 52.9 team run defense grade this week, and their defensive tackles combined for a 38.1. I love Javon Hargrave and some of the guys they have in there, Malik Collins, but they lean towards the pass rush. They do. If you want to hit this Niner defense, you run right down the pipe on them. It showed in the second half of last year after Hufanga was out. It showed even against the Lions in the NFC title game. There was a part of that second half against the Lions where for some reason they stopped running the ball. You want to beat the Niners, you go right at them in the run game. Preferably away from Bosa because he's obviously really good and Warner's great on the second level. But those guys mask what has been a weakness lately for this Niner team in the middle. And then my most impressive, honestly, it won't show in that overall grade that we showed there for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, baby.
He's playing fantastic football. Let me tell you, his grade is dragged down a bit by a couple of plays. 2 fumbles. One where there was like a broken run play, actually, where the motion was mistimed, and he tried to like toss it back to, I think it was Aaron Jones, and it ended up a fumble, and that kind of goes. Another one where he was scrambling, and he fumbled like literally a foot before the sideline, and it went down as a fumble out of bounds. Those two plays are dragging the grade down. When I take those two out, his grade's actually an 83.3, which against this defense and the way they played
really damn good.
After the game he had last week, Sam Darnold, you mentioned Kevin O'Connell. He is so comfortable right now between the pass protection, O'Connell's play calling. I kind of compare this to, like, it's almost like O'Connell's the point guard, and he's setting up a great shooter with open shots. He's given Darnold a lot of open shots right now, and he's hitting all his first reads are off the charts. They're hitting downfield. This isn't just Sam Darnold coming out here throwing screens. So far, a 91.2 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws through 2 games.
Extremely impressive.
4th in the NFL.
Yeah, extremely.
They're
impressive.
throwing downfield, but everything is in sync. I've never, especially in New York, I've never seen Sam Darnold with this level of comfort and this level of just knowing, okay, get to the top of my drop. Here's my read. Here's my high-low, or here's my matchup, or just sometimes just throw it to Jefferson because that's what we do, and just do it. And just go. He's doing everything with conviction. If you take out those 2 fumbles, he played a spectacular football game again. And honestly, it feels early like we were dead wrong on the Vikings being so sure of the Vikings being in last place because of the way he's playing. And O'Connell is probably one of the 5 best play callers in the league.
No, he's one of the best head coaches in the NFL, and I think he's proving that this year. Certainly, but doing more with less, it felt like. But it feels even bad to say that because the roster is still talented, and they're just maximizing it. To be honest with you, hey, we're obviously talking about a lot of grades. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can see all these grades before the show even comes out. So if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, I just wanted to mention we talk about the top 5s, everything like that. You could see all of the premium grades while you're watching the show, even a little bit before you are watching the show, by going to PFF.com and getting a PFF Plus subscription. So make sure you head over and do that. Seahawks at Patriots is the next game that we're talking about here. Overtime thriller in New England.
This is a weird one, too.
Seahawks come out on top 23-20. If you look at the Seahawks, the victorious team, Rayshon Jenkins, their safety, was the highest graded player at an 80.9. Wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, big game for him, 79.9. On the day, defensive tackle Leonard Williams, 79.2. Edge rusher Boye Mafe, another good game for him, 78.8. Cornerback Tariq Woolen with a 74.2. And then Geno Smith with an 83.1. He would have been number 1 on that list if we were including quarterbacks and not just making sure that we highlight them outside of the top 5s. For New England, safety Jalen Hawkins with an 80.8 to lead all Patriots. Tight end Hunter Henry with a 79.1. Dietrich Wise Jr. coming in at number 3 with a 72.3. Anthony Jennings a 72.5. And then Ramondre Stevenson with a 72.3. Jacoby Brissett, 64.9 grade on the day. What is your stat that told the story here, Dalton?
So we know what type of team the Patriots are. They obviously want to run and play defense. And Hunter Henry had a big game, obviously, 8 catches for 109. But we were worried about the Patriots wide receivers coming into this, and we probably should still be. And Patriots wide receivers had 3 catches for 19 yards in this game, and Jalen Polk had the touchdown down on the goal line. But otherwise, it's just not there right now. You've got a passing game that again Henry stepped up. Last week they ran the ball heavy, but 16 points in last week's game, 20 in this week's game, and it really feels like a plotting experiment right now. And I know Brissett's managing the game well. I don't have much against Jacoby Brissett. I just don't think he's working with much on the outside. Through 2 weeks, Patriots wide receivers are last in the NFL in receiving grade, and they are looking for options on the perimeter.
Yeah, I think the stat that told the story for me here is I just has to be Geno Smith and the incredible day that he had. 52 dropbacks for Geno, 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. To have more than 50 dropbacks and 0 turnover-worthy plays in an NFL game is pretty spectacular. He also had an 87.0 adjusted completion percentage. I mean, this man was dealing in this game. And so, you look at a group that I think Gerard Mayo is coaching these guys up really, really well. It transitions into my most impressive. This Patriots team's 2-0 against the spread this season. I mean, obviously that means that they've been sort of punching above their weight class. Obviously the big win against the Cincinnati Bengals was huge for them to start the season, but it's tough to go on the road at any place in the NFL, and especially when you play a team that is as well coached as it feels like the Patriots are, maximizing whatever is on that roster, certainly on the defensive side of things. But how well Geno Smith plays continues to just be such an impressive part of what Seattle has done over the last 3 seasons, really, and he's continuing in this season. He was sharing the wealth to all of his different receivers, the big plays by DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba having his best game as a pro. No Kenneth Walker in this one, so they really had to rely on the passing game. That's why you see those 52 dropbacks, and he was up to the challenge. And him being up to that challenge, to me, is what makes him one of the more underrated quarterbacks in this league and why Seattle ended up winning this game in the end. So Geno, to me, as a whole, is what told the story here. But what about you? What's your most impressive?
For me, I'll stay in the passing game. I'm going to go with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was just really, really good in this. This was the best we've seen him look in the NFL. 12 catches, 117 yards, 5 first downs, made a couple people miss. 3 contested catches, Trevor. That's the same number he had all of last season. And I see with Smith-Njigba, last year when I watched him, I didn't think it was an issue with him. I don't think they used him in a creative enough manner. Right now, I think Ryan Grubb looks at Smith-Njigba, and it's why, in part, because Geno was there and why Ryan Grubb is such a good fit. But I think one of the things he's found when you go back and watch the Washington tape, right, a couple miles up the road when he was still at Washington, Smith-Njigba is playing like the Jalen McMillan role, where it's move him around and just find ways to get him one-on-one and just find way. He's like my first down guy, and he's just my guy that can get me 8 yards.
Well, it's a Tyler Lockett thing, right? Like Lockett felt like that guy for the Seahawks, and now it's the passing of the torch, if you will, while Lockett is still there.
Yeah, and Ryan Grubb in the same way, even I talked about Chris Godwin, I think that's what he's doing with Smith-Njigba, because you know what DK Metcalf can do out there. And he had a bomb catch. I think it was a 56-yard touchdown in this game. It was a busting coverage. He can get vertical the whole bit. But I think Smith-Njigba, when I was thinking about last year, when I thought Seattle and I think it was Brian Schottenheimer didn't really use Smith-Njigba in a creative way. It was just kind of, all right, hey, line up in the slot, run your route, move to the next play. Creating space for guys is just as important, I think, as them separating on their own. They have to be able to separate on their own at some point, but I think creating those matchups, creating space like we've talked about with Brock Bowers, with Chris Godwin, with some other guys we'll continue to talk about. I think Smith-Njigba's in that category. I really liked how Ryan Grubb used him in this game.
My most disappointing, you sort of touched on it already there. New England's receivers, they just got to be better. I mean, no receiver out of Hunter Henry had a receiving grade above a 61.0, and Hunter Henry just dominated all the targets, all the yards in this game. Whether it's Jalen Polk, who's in the lineup already, or, Javon Baker, who needs to get in the lineup more at some point throughout this season. There's just got to be more weapons to throw to. Whether it is Jacoby Brissett or whenever they go to Drake May, these receivers just straight up have to be better. And I think the offensive line's holding up maybe in certain spots better than we thought it was going to, but the receivers need to step up next in order for New England to continue to be this, feared underdog, it feels like, throughout the season, like they have the chance to be after the first couple of weeks. But you're most disappointed before we move on to the next game.
Going to spotlight the offensive line for the Patriots real quick. Mike Owenu really struggled in this game, and I feel for him because I think when he was younger, like first came in the league, we saw him switching between guard and tackle and really having some success at both. But I think we were in agreement that he would look better at guard at this point, and some of the more recent numbers show that. But he's playing right tackle right now because the Pats have a lot of injuries. Yesterday, a 37.9 pass pro grade, 3 pressures, and 4 other reps that he lost in pass pro. He right now, I think it was 6 out of those 7 losses that he lost to the outside. He looks like a guard playing tackle right now, and he really needs to be. They need him to be their best offensive lineman, and I do feel for him because I think at this point it's a decent argument that he's playing out of position. So it's somebody they do need to play better, but I don't know if their offensive line injuries are going to allow for that. It would be something I would watch going forward.
The next game here, your Jets
squeaked one out
at the Tennessee Titans. Squeaked it out 24-17 here in this one. When we look at the Jets' top 5 graded players on the day, center Joe Tippmann's at the top of that list with an 83.6. Linebacker Jamian Sherwood with an 82.7. Offensive tackle Tyron Smith with an 80.8. Michael Carter, their cornerback, 77.3. And then rounding things out for the top 5 at number 5 is wide receiver Garrett Wilson with a 74.4. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers had a 67.2. For the Tennessee Titans, their running back Tony Pollard, 80.6. That was the top-graded player for them. Linebacker Ernest Jones, 79.8. Wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who scored a monster touchdown there, which we will get to in a second, 73.3 on this game. Offensive tackle J.C. Latham, the rookie, had a 69.5. And then Dylan Radins, their offensive guard, a 67.7. Will Levis, not as bad as last week, 65.9. Although I will say, My stat that told the story here is Will Levis, they're just living and dying by the sword. Like that's all it is. Like that is what the Titans offense is. Now, like we said last week, you have to eliminate just the catastrophically bad. And to be fair to Levis, he cut his backhanded throws in half this week. He had 2 in week 1. He only had 1 this week, which garnered a very colorful response from his head coach.
Rightfully.
Obviously, those have to stop existing in the playbook. But 10.8 average depth of target for Will Levis, 3rd highest in the NFL behind just Trevor Lawrence and Anthony Richardson for this week. 3.03 time to throw. It's the 8th highest time to throw of any of these quarterbacks. So it kind of just, this is sort of his identity. He's a big arm thrower. He's a big game hunter. If you're going to start Will Levis, this is just the quarterback that he is. We saw him just launching it all day, trying to complete these deep passes. Some he was able to actually hit on this week. Last week he wasn't as successful with it, but this is kind of just going to be the Titans offense. Like until next offseason comes around and we're really able to see what Brian Callahan wants to do here for this team, if they're going to win, they're going to have to win it off of Levis's arm anyway, so he's just going to be chucking it and hugging it all year long.
Yeah, I mean, in that part I don't have as much an issue with. The way they're running the ball well through 2 weeks. And if you want to take play action shots and find things like that, fine. But you can't have the shovels and the backhands and these things. I mean, it's like you just mentioned, these things are inexcusable. And they're the types of things that if they continue to happen, we will be talking about Tennessee drafting a new quarterback next year.
Yeah, for sure.
Because those are the things that lose you football games. So he cost them points yesterday, cost them the game against the Bears.
Right.
There's an argument that they are not that far from, instead of being 0-2 to 2-0, but it's really because of the turnovers.
So what is your stat that told the story for this game?
So I know Aaron Rodgers is all the big talk and he looks good and this and that and the other, but just as big a story is their offensive line, the Jets' offensive line, and their pass protection specifically. They allowed 1 pressure, just a sack all day. Just 1 pressure, their offensive line. I believe the other 2 pressures were charged to Breece Hall. So far this year, their offensive line is 8th in the NFL in pass pro grade, and that comes with a heavy kind of a heavy downgrade from Morgan Moses. Last week he had to block Nick Bosa. Tough assignment. I mean, that's other than Morgan Moses not really being able to block Nick Bosa, this O-line has been just spectacular, and their run blocking got better this week. It was a 59.8 last week, 75.2 this week. If this Jets offensive line plays all year like they played yesterday, they're incredibly dangerous. I'm going to roll it right into my most impressive guy, the highest graded guy for the Jets, Joe Tippmann. There was a lot of talk about the new guys that the Jets brought in, Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Morgan Moses. Joe Tippmann, second-year center out of Wisconsin. And last year, he started the year playing guard. They didn't even have him playing center, and then he got moved to center. This is an incredibly athletic player, both in the pass and run game, screen game. Super impressed with his tape, Trevor. 83.5 run blocking grade, a career high. 9 positive grades in the run game.
That's great.
Yesterday, 9. I'm telling you, he's got a level of athleticism that not very many offensive linemen have, and it is showing right now. And him developing in year 2 is just as big a story as all the new guys on this Jets O-line. They continue to play the way they're playing. They're going to find it on offense.
And it's just, it's the size too, right? Like that's why you draft Joe Tippmann, because he's a bigger center player, but if he gives you that athleticism too, it's just a major bonus. My most impressive, you kind of downplayed it a little bit there. You're like, oh, everyone wants to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers because I don't know how many other QBs in the NFL win that game yesterday other than Aaron Rodgers.
He found a way. That's
because
what he does.
That Titans defense was playing well, and to be fair, outside of the offensive line playing better, there's just not a lot of weapons that are just getting open for the New York Jets. And they were trying to run the ball. They want to be a run-the-ball first type of a team. And so they were continuing to try that, but it wasn't really super effective, especially early on in the game. I don't know many quarterbacks in this league who would have been comfortable enough not getting impatient with how the Jets were playing, especially in the first half of that game. And Rodgers was. When we went to the half, Rodgers' numbers were very pedestrian. But the most important part to me, 0 turnovers for him. Because Rodgers could have been sitting there, and even with him missing all of last year with that Achilles injury, given his age and how much success he has had in the league before, I could have seen him just going like, all right, screw this. I don't care. Like, I'm going for it. I'm taking a shot. He never did that. And when he did, he only did so when his receivers had a chance to actually make the play, even if it was tight coverage. It was beautiful throws by Rodgers to the sideline. He had a throw I don't remember if it was Garrett Wilson. No. It was the throw to Mike Williams that we were watching yesterday, where we both just are like best back shoulder thrower in the NFL.
Yep.
Like he's just one of the best back shoulder passers we've ever seen.
I think he's the number one. In that very specific category, I'd put him number one.
And
We've seen it so many times.
He's the most impressive to me, not because like I have some stat to pull that says like he's great, but the stat that I would pull is the 0 turnovers, interceptions. He didn't throw them. And I think for a large majority of that game, you could have very well gotten impatient with how things were going. And I don't know how many quarterbacks in the NFL would have stayed the course the way that Rodgers did enough for them to know, hey, at the end of the game, we keep playing like this, it's all right. We'll have our chances. We'll win. They'll give us the ball. They'll make the turnovers. We're going to win the football game. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that if there is, I don't want to say any other quarterback, because there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in this league, but Rodgers on this Jets team and his demeanor right now is so important for why they are going to win, because it just doesn't feel like he is going to be impatient with them. At least we did not see that.
No,
against the
Jets traditionally don't win games like that. That's true. It's just that thing. It's like, okay, we're in this tight game. We think we're the more talented team, but we're not playing up. The Jets normally, but you're right. That's why they don't. That's why they I don't think he has a turnover-worthy play. I think his interception in the Niner game wasn't even considered one with the pass defense and everything like that. So just to have a guy on this Jet team that isn't going to put the football in danger and that doesn't make you nervous is a massive difference.
You did Joe Timmon. We got the same most disappointing. Sauce.
Oh, do we really? I didn't see that we had the same one. Yeah.
It has to be Sauce. This is the worst game of his NFL career.
That's just what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd expect to bounce back. He's still, to me,
right.
He's still the best corner in football, but
right.
Calvin Ridley got him for sure. A 30 coverage grade and 97 yards allowed, both career worst. I mean, Sauce, I fully believe he'll bounce back 3 days from now. But, it was a tough one for Sauce for sure. Calvin Ridley played really, really well in this game.
Yeah, no, he did. And Sauce is a phenomenal talent, so he's absolutely going to bounce back. But there's no doubt about it. This was
pretty good chance that's a one-time thing.
This was the game where he gave up the most. You mentioned the coverage grade there. Gave up 5 receptions, 97 yards, touchdown allowed. Like it was tough for him. It was a tough performance. But every corner, it's the nature of the position. This is always going to happen. He wasn't going to have a wire-to-wire Hall of Fame career where he had no games.
Maybe that's the new motto when it's something like that. Even Sauce Gardner has a bad day.
And now,
maybe the rarest of them all.
You know, that's encouraging to all the watchers and listeners out there. You know what? If Sauce Gardner can have a bad day and still be an all-pro corner, you know what? So can you.
We can push through.
I don't know if you out there can be an all-pro corner. It's a tough job, but maybe, whatever you're doing in life. Look, football season finally upon us. Obviously, we're getting the season kicked off. We've got a lot of crazy things that have already happened. The week 1 overreactions, some of what we saw in week 2. Obviously, Bryce Young getting benched. It's a lot to keep up with. But this season, we're going to be listening to a new podcast called The Offensive Line with Annie Agar. Annie is an NFL insider. You might know her from her Uncomfortable Team Meetings on Social series that you've seen probably everywhere. And the Offensive Line podcast with Annie kicks back with NFL stars and celeb superfans throughout the season to unpack all the weekly news, the game lines, the odds, the spread, with the usual brand of sharp wit and banter that you're used to from her content. Pod's packed with all sorts of humor, and it's a must-listen to keep up with all the NFL news and culture, which is obviously going at 1,000,000 miles an hour now that the season has gotten kicked off. You can follow the Offensive Line podcast on the Wondery app or wherever you are getting your podcast. Plus, you can access bonus episodes and listen ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus. Giants Commanders. This will be an interesting one. I got a couple of good points to get to with this one. Washington comes away with a win 21-18. We got to get to the top 5. So let's go Washington first. I feel like that's going to be the better segue. Bobby Wagner, man, still got it.
Ageless.
89.3 from the ageless Bobby Wagner. Defensive tackle Deron Payne with a 72.4 at number 2 on this list. Guard Nick Allegretti with a 71.7. Cornerback Benjamin St. Juste with a 69.0. And then number 5 on the team rounding it out, Brian Robinson with a 68.1. Quarterback Jaden Daniels with a 64.7 on the day. And then flipping sides to the New York Giants, Malik Neighbors, damn near elite grade, 89.4. Linebacker Micah McFadden with an 87.8. Edge rusher Brian Burns coming in at number 3 on this list, 80.2. Andrew Thomas, their offensive tackle, with a 79.8. Dexter Lawrence rounded things out with the top 5 at a 75.3. And then quarterback Daniel Jones with a 71.4. Close divisional game here. Dalton, what was the stat that told the story?
I think it's one of the things, it sounds funny because it's one of the things, though, that I really liked with Jaden Daniels coming out is he just, even when things aren't going great, he doesn't put the ball in danger. And so he's got a 5-yard average depth of target in this game. And Daniels, if you throw on the passing tape right now through 2 games, you're not going to be blown away by much of anything. The feet, he can absolutely run. We know that. We knew that anyway. But he only has 1 turnover-worthy play through 2 games, and it was actually a strip sack last week against Tampa. He's just not giving the game away, and it's such a contrast from what Sam Howell was last year, who I think led the league in turnover-worthy plays. It's keeping them in games. Now, last week their defense wasn't good enough. They gave up 37 points. This was about Jaden Daniels keeping Washington in the game. They ran the ball. Brian Robinson had 133 yards, but right now he's 3rd in the NFL in completion percentage. He's got the 2nd lowest average depth of target. I think actually only ahead of Patrick Mahomes, which is another thing, but This is what Jaden Daniels does, and this is kind of what I expected him to do early. He's going to run the football well because he's a great athlete, but he's going to play it safe. Washington doesn't have very many, if any, vertical threats. It's not going to be the same as it was at LSU, but his adjustment to it right now, while it's not flashy and the grades aren't flashy at all, a 64.7 is not flashy. But right this minute, unlike, say, Caleb Williams or Bo Nix, he is not giving the football away. Right? Only the 1 turnover-worthy play. So the flash will come, and they need more receivers. Next year, offseason, that's a long-term problem. But right now, at the very least, they know Daniels gives them a chance to win, and they found a way to win this game.
Yeah, I think the stat that told the story for me is that the Commanders should have won this game by more. They should have, because
that's true too.
Last week they were 3 for 3 in the red zone when it came to scoring touchdowns. This week they were 0 for 6. So the Giants clamping down in the red zone. I want to give them credit there, but 0 for 6. They get a couple of those. This game's not even close.
Yep.
So this game obviously ended very close on the scoreboard, 21-18. But my stat that told the story is that it should have been more in Washington's favor. It really should have. So that was, to me, a big takeaway there. It's a team that, it opens up a little bit more of a conversation. You go 100% the week before, you go 3 for 3 against Tampa. And then you go 0 for 6 this week against the Giants. Obviously, again, like I said, you want to give respect to the Giants and their defense in the red area. But you got to figure out a way to make it happen there. You can't go goose egg when you get 6 opportunities in the red zone. So that's something to monitor all year long, what Cliff Kingsbury can do as the offensive coordinator there when space becomes at a premium, right? So that, to me, is the stat that told the story. Can I just talk about my most impressive before we get to yours?
Absolutely.
Because this one was nuts. We figured this out when we were watching games yesterday. It's Malik Nabers. He has to be the most impressive on this list. 18 of the 28 passes that Daniel Jones threw were to Malik Nabers. 127 of the 178 passing yards that this team had were to Malik Nabers. And the 60.7 threat percentage. Remember, if you've watched the show, if you've watched NFL SC, if you watch the college show, we talk about this all the time. Threat percentage at PFF, it basically means wide receiver usage. How often are you targeted per route that you are running? If you are in the low 30%, you're a superstar. You're Tyreek Hill, you're CeeDee Lamb, you're Justin Jefferson. Malik Nabers' threat percentage was a 60.7 yesterday. Ain't nobody else on the team as far as Daniel Jones is concerned. That is the second highest single game threat percentage that we have ever recorded in the PFF era, outside of Brandon Marshall's record-breaking game when he had 21 catches on 28 targets in, what year was that?
2009.
2009 was that game. This is the second highest performance ever that we have ever recorded when it comes to how often they were targeting Malik Nabers in the passing game. So he has to be my most impressive because this dude has very clearly arrived in the game plan here for the New York Giants.
I know you wanted that one, so I wasn't going to just go, oh, yeah, what he said. Although, you're absolutely right. He's already the best player on their whole team. Other than maybe Dexter Lawrence, but at least on their he's by far their best offensive player, which is crazy, and by far the Commander's best defensive player. the ageless. It's Bobby Wagner. You mentioned it at the top. I remember you asked me yesterday, you're like, is Bobby Wagner still really good? And I was like, he's still like the best. Other than Fred Warner, he's still like the best linebacker in football. 90.8 overall, 90.1 run D, couple of run stops, pass breakup. And if you watch especially the run D tape, I still don't think there's anyone in the NFL right now who sheds blockers better than Bobby Wagner. I don't think there's a single linebacker that does it better than him.
Around a long time, knows how to do it.
And they need to figure out some things around him. I'll roll into the most disappointing. They've got to figure out coverage. And look, apparently we saw it at LSU. Now we see it with the Giants covering Malik Neighbors is really hard. But they got to find answers at corner. Emmanuel Forbes was out for this game. Guys like Michael Davis and Benjamin St. Juste struggling out there. Washington corners gave up 11 catches for 151 yards and 9 first downs. And they're currently last in the NFL in coverage grade. They got to figure it out in the secondary because through 2 games, it's been pretty much a mess. The front 7 looks better. We're getting there. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Deron Payne. We're getting Johnny Newton some reps. I think their front 7 is going to be pretty good as the year goes on, but they have to figure out some coverage on this team. But Bobby Wagner, it's just ageless, absolutely ageless. I sit here, I watch him, and I go, could he just play as long as like Tom Brady did? Honestly, watch him.
There's no way.
Watch him shed blocks in this game. It's amazing.
He's ageless, certainly with his success in this defense for sure. And I think Dan Quinn's getting the most out of him. And he wanted that leader in the centerpiece of the defense, which it's great to see that it's already paying dividends for them. My disappointing, it's the Brian Daboll era right now because I like Brian Daboll as a coach. I really do. I think he deserves a lot of credit for what happened with Josh Allen and how he improved with the Buffalo Bills. I think Josh Allen has said that before himself. I think he's really great when it comes to offense and working with quarterbacks. There's only so much you can do with Daniel Jones, so I sort of feel bad for him in that regard. But now we're getting to much worse stuff, right? I mean, I think now it feels like he's a dead man walking, right? When you handle the kicking situation the way they did, where like Graham Gano's on the injury report, he's got a groin injury, you don't elevate the kicker, you stick with Graham Gano. After the game, he said, well, we felt like Graham Gano could go, and then he gets hurt in the game. Now it's not, he didn't re-aggravate the groin injury, but it was a hamstring injury. So Daboll sitting here fighting with a reporter, he's like, well, it's a hamstring injury. It wasn't a groin injury, and the reporter was saying back to him, was like, well, you don't think that the groin injury maybe like contributed to the hamstring injury? And so it's just an awkward back and forth there, but very clearly it was the wrong call because Gano gets hurt. They go for an extra point. They miss the extra point because they don't have a real kicker that's out there because they didn't make it, their backup one active. And then they go for 2 really when they shouldn't have, and they didn't have to in 2 other times in the game. And so it's like,
and the 4th and 4 at the end, their last offensive play in a vacuum, not having a kicker, it's okay. In a vacuum, that's a call. I would never go for that. I would just take the lead there.
And it's just like,
it's a team that's finding ways to lose.
Ways, and that's why it feels like Daboll is a dead man walking at this point. And it sucks because I think he's a good coach, and I think he's going to be a good, offensive coordinator, somewhere else.
I think he'll get another head coaching shot. Absolutely.
This next cycle? No.
Not this next cycle,
okay.
but no, he will. It won't be that long before he gets another chance. He's an excellent coach who is just the combination of everything that's going on with this team right now. And they played, when they made the playoffs 2 years ago, it really seemed like they played so far over their heads because in the regular season, I think they were 29th as a team in overall grade.
Yeah.
Did he win Coach of the Year that year or no? If he didn't, he deserved it.
Was that the Kevin Stefanski year?
2022? Yeah, it might have been.
I think that was the Stefanski year.
Yeah, if he didn't win it, he certainly deserved it.
I think he was up there for it, though.
But this Giants team, they are finding ways to lose right now, and it's tough when you're short on talent and you're a team finding ways to lose.
Yep, no doubt. Rams at Cardinals. Cardinals, huge win in this game, 41-10. We'll start with the Cardinals and their top 5 from this game because it is absolutely noteworthy. At the top of the list, rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. with a 91.2. On the other side of things, edge rusher Dennis Gardeck, 91.9. Tight end Trey McBride got an 89.4. Budda Baker, their safety, got an 78.5, and then cornerback Starling Thomas is 75.9 to round things out in the top 5. Kyler Murray would have been at the top of that list on either side of the ball, 96.9. Insane PFF grade from Kyler Murray, which I know we're going to get to here in a second. We're going to break that down a little bit more. Los Angeles Rams, not as many 80s and 90s. In fact, none. Jared Verse, top on the list. I love to see the rookie there, but just a 75.5. And then it dips pretty quick into the 60s. Linebacker Troy Reeder with a 65.8. Wide receiver Demarcus Robinson, a 67.9. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp, despite leaving with the injury, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a long-term thing for him, 67.5. Rob Havenstein, 65.7. to round that top 5, and then Matthew Stafford just a 57.2 overall grade here. What's the stat that told the story here for you in this game?
So I'm letting you have the Kyler Murray rant. So I'm gonna look at just the Rams.
You can piggyback off it. We could tag team it.
It all goes together because it's the Rams and their coverage grade and a 35.6 team coverage grade. Look, they were last in the NFL in coverage grade last year, and now with all the injuries they have on offense, they can't have performances like this on the back end. Veteran guys like Tre'Davious White and Cam Curl have to play better. Maybe a young kid like a Cam Kinchins or Kobe Durant. I mean, they have to be better on the back end, because if they're going to be as bad in coverage as they were last year, and now they have these offensive injuries again, it's going to go back to looking like 2 years ago when they won only 5 games. I think it was they went 5-12 2 years ago, when they were really struggling, and all those O-line injuries got them, and the coverage was struggling, and you hate to see the Rams this early or at all get back to looking like that, but we're feeling some deja vu here, I think, with all of the injuries. Puka Nacua, they're saying, is out for at least, I think, the first half of the season. Now Cooper Kupp's hurt. They're running out of answers on offense. They got starting offensive linemen out, but if they want to stay on these games, they have to be better on the back end. But part of the reason they're struggling on the back end was just the Cardinals were so darn good, and you take it away with Kyler Murray, because that 96.9 that might stand as the best for the whole season.
Right,
it's incredible.
Yeah, just an unbelievable performance from Kyler, and there's a couple of different ways that you can look at it. You can look at all the big time throws. Yeah, what do you have, 6, 7, something like that? Just an insane performance of how well he played. But I want to look specifically at Murray's success on broken plays, right? Because we talk about the Cardinals' offensive line still developing, they're still getting there. And we talk about time to throw like it's a bad thing. And obviously, you don't want to get carried away with this kind of stuff. We talk about with Caleb Williams, like, you can't do that in the NFL.
Kyler can do it.
Kyler's kind of doing it, right? Like,
I'll tell you what, he's
another cut from the same cloth, like the Oklahoma system.
He's certainly healthy, isn't he?
So on passes with a time to throw above 3 seconds, which, remember, the average in the NFL is just under 2.8 seconds. So if you take that all the way up to 3, and I'm telling you, I'm getting 3 seconds and beyond. Kyler Murray yesterday, 2 touchdowns, 3 big-time throws, and a 95.7 passing grade. He was unbelievable on broken plays. That is the true definition of a guy where the play is never dead. And I think we talk about that so much about guys who are mobile, but it's sort of this like catch-22, right? Like we talk about that with Caleb Williams, but and Will Levis is another example, right? But when we talk about it with them, we talk about it like we need to eliminate that from their game. When we talk about it with Kyler for how special this guy is, you say, dude, you can do this.
Yeah, let it go.
This, in fact, probably needs to be a part of your game this year if we're going to get what we need to out of this offense with the offensive line still developing. Now, he is a player who I think can play in structure, but I also think that he realizes the hand that he's been dealt this season with the offensive line still getting there. So for him to have as much success on broken plays means that the Arizona Cardinals can put up 30 points against like any team any week. And that, when we talked about the Arizona Cardinals in our division previews before the season, and I said that we're going to see the closest thing to the MVP level Kyler Murray that we have seen since that 2021 season, this is what I'm talking about. It's the monster big-time throws, the ability to keep every single play alive, yet not just go catastrophic when he gets out of the pocket, when he has to scramble.
Yeah, no, this is the vision you had if you had the optimistic sense of the Cardinals, because you're like, okay, the second half of last year when he got back, they played like a top 10 offense, but they have the lowest graded defense in football, right? And obviously the Rams are struggling right now, and we're certainly Jonathan Gannon and those guys are working on the defense. But Kyler playing like this, you're right, you almost make a defense irrelevant. They scored 28 points last week. I know they had 1 touchdown on a kick return that was in Buffalo. And then you do what they did this week, and you mentioned the weapons. Give me Marvin Harrison Jr., man. This isn't this what we were looking for a week ago, right? Like just 4 catches for 130 yards and a couple of touchdowns, and I mean this right here. If you have Marvin Harrison playing and I think you mentioned it too. I don't know why we didn't see this last week. There was a couple of big plays that they made by design, and it was within it. But there was, I think, 1 or 2 of those catches where, especially one down the left sideline, where it was the broken play, and Harrison just kind of finds his way open, and the savvy that comes with, a guy with obviously the lineage of Marvin Harrison Jr., where you go, okay, if he's going to show us the instincts now and this chemistry with Kyler that we're getting at, now this is just what we were looking for. with Harrison because they're loaded. Look at them. They've got Harrison. They've got Michael Wilson. Got Dortch. Trey McBride was unbelievable.
Yes.
And he's one of the best tight ends in football. Connor and Benson. And I think that's another story in this game. Despite Kyler clearly being the best player on the field, they ran for well over 200 yards, and it's 240 yards, somewhere around there. They have balance. They have a great quarterback. They have a big group of weapons. This is a dangerous, dangerous offense, and maybe we might have underestimated that side of it, how dangerous they can be. If Kyler's going to play like that, they're going to be in every football game that they play this year.
So my most impressive, I got to go to Dennis Gardeck on the other side of things because what a relentless worker this dude is. Oof. I mean, he's got a really nice look. When I watched some of his pressures, because he had 4 pressures in this game, I guess you should just list it: 92.0 pass rush grade, 3 sacks, 4 pressures, 33.3 pass rush win percentage. So obviously an incredible day as a pass rusher. A couple of those pressures, he's timing the snap. And some people look at snap count timing as like almost like cheating. Like, okay, well, you're not really getting off the ball. It's not like you're winning with athleticism alone.
If they don't call it, they don't call it.
But it's savviness from him. He's not. It's not like I'm just guessing kind of a thing. To me, it's true savviness. Because, and the reason why I think that with Gardeck is because you watch a handful of his plays from this past week against the Rams. There was one play in particular that was one of his pressures where Matthew Stafford checks to a different play at the line of scrimmage. Gardeck's the one who's making the call on the defense for everybody to switch. He's the one who sees what Matthew Stafford is doing. He notices, I think, the tight end motions from one side to the other, and he immediately turns to the other defensive lineman and he gives them some sort of hand signal. And then he turns to the linebacker and he gives him a hand signal. He's the one who recognizes it. And then he tees off on the guy and he gets into the backfield and he creates another pressure. I can't remember if that was one of his sacks or not, but that to me is super impressive about him. It's not just the fact that he is a relentless worker who is always going to play until the whistle. It's not that he's got an underrated first step, but it's also he's winning up here as well. And so that's why you see that production that you do, even with a obviously battered Rams offensive line there. Is it going to be an elite performance for him every single week? No, but I think an underrated part of how he plays the game is how he knows how to attack these offensive linemen. And I think the Arizona Cardinals got a good one. Do you say Marvin Harrison Jr. is your most impressive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So who is your most disappointing?
I don't know if it's disappointing so much as just something I'm worried about. This Rams offensive line. Look, Stafford's an older quarterback, and they've got a lot of injuries, and the guys who did play in this game didn't play particularly great because of guys like Gardeck, but I think it's just something we have to worry about going forward because we saw this 2 years ago and the Rams only ended up winning 5 games, and you'd hate to see them have to go down that road again with so many injuries and everything happening to them, and it's just this offensive line. I'd be worried about it. It's not good right now, and I know it's a lot of bad luck, like you're going to mention, but
yeah,
it's a problem, and especially now without your 2 best receivers, it's a major problem for a unit that going into the year looked really stable.
Rams injury luck is the most disappointing here. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Joe Nobu, and Rob Havenstein, who was in his lineup this week, but Steve Avila, Darius Williams, they've all been hurt. It just only so much you can do.
And it sucks. Very few, if any, teams are getting through that.
It's a bad part of the game. It's everybody's least favorite part of the game, and so that sucks. Steelers at Broncos, 13-3. Pittsburgh Steelers come away victorious in this one. We'll talk about the Steelers first. Their guard James Daniels was at the top of the list with a 91.5 overall grade. Keanu Benton with an 88.7. Tight end Darnell Washington, my man, scored a touchdown in this one, 88.3. I was pretty high on him going into the draft, so need him to be more than just a blocker to live up to my draft hype that I had for him. But safety Deshaun Elliott, 80.5. Wide receiver George Pickens, 79.6. Justin Fields, a 69.9 in this one. Denver, on the other side of things, their linebacker Alex Singleton was the top-graded player at a 78.2. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds at 77.6. Safety Brandon Jones, 70.2. Safety P.J. Lockett at 69.2. Wide receiver Lil Jordan Humphrey at a 67.4. And then Bo Nix, another tough week, 46.8 here. What's the stat that told the story, Dalton?
I'll stay with Bo Nix, and it's kind of a similar thing to what it was last week. The Denver just can't work the ball down the field right now. They're really struggling on 10-plus yard throws. Nix himself is really struggling on 10-plus yard throws. 3 for 11 for 90 yards and 2 interceptions and a 36.6 passing grade. It's just if they're going to be in this box, in this 10-yard bubble where we have to run the ball and we just have to throw slants and do short stuff, that it's not going to work. They have to. It's not Oregon where all of his athletes at Oregon are better than everybody and they can make all the plays after the catch. Denver, they're short on vertical threats. Nix right now is forcing balls into windows downfield when they're behind that he really doesn't need to be. It's a problem. It's a real problem, and I know Sean Payton's trying to figure it out. He's got a really young team trying to create through it. I don't think we've seen Troy Franklin at all in the first 2 games, if maybe a handful of snaps, but they need to find some sort of threat to just get safeties off of them and allow Nix to be able to take shots. I think the biggest play of the game yesterday was that reverse when he lined up out at receiver, and then we had the big trick play going, but in a traditional sense, they just cannot work the ball downfield right now.
Yeah, look, I think the stat that tells the story here is, you've heard it a billion times, the Broncos have the most expensive line in the NFL. They're not good. They're not good right now. And look, Nix needs to play better 100%, but that offensive line is bad. In theory,
plays into it.
In theory, they were probably going into this thinking, we have spent enough money to where we have a top 10, at the very least a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. And Nix can play behind that. We can get Nix to learn and play well behind a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. Through 2 games, the Denver Broncos are 31st in overall blocking grade, 32nd in run blocking grade, 24th in pass blocking grade. And when it comes to Javonte Williams, he had -6 yards before contact against the Steelers.
That'll do it.
Dude, it's not even close to top 10. Look, Bo Nix is bad right now. Don't get me wrong, but come on. This offensive line also it stinks.
It's why in my head I thought this was a rough. Obviously, the Steelers are a rough matchup to block for anybody.
Of course,
but
right.
For this team specifically in this game, it doesn't surprise me that the Broncos didn't score a touchdown in this game, because that's a question every week when you play Pittsburgh. But if it's that bad, then no. I mean, you're right. You can't function.
What are you going to do? It's not just not a top 10 offensive line. It's very close to the worst offensive line in the league, and you're paying the most money for it. Those dudes got to step up. That's the entire preview for what the Denver Broncos are going to be for every game moving forward. Can the offensive line play even serviceable at this point? Because they haven't so far 2 games into the season. My most impressive is Justin Fields. Through 2 games, 79.1 passing grade, 4 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. Best throw of his career he had in this game.
And it got called back.
They got called back, which is bullshit, because it was awesome.
I think that was the best throw of the week. By anybody.
It was the best throw of Justin Fields' career.
Is
he a world beater right now? No. Is he the best version of Justin Fields that we have seen so far in his NFL career? Yes. And it's worth pointing out that he is that right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I do not care if Russell Wilson is healthy next week. No way I'm going back to Russell Wilson until Justin Fields gives me a reason to do that.
Leave it till the wheels fall off.
Yes.
And the thing I love about the way he's playing is he's just not allowing the wheels to fall off. If there's a throwaway, if there's a sack he needs to take, if he just needs to take off and run and slide, cool. But I think they've very much gotten through to him. Look, our defense is the best part of this team. We are very much a work in progress on offense, especially at receiver and even on the offensive line. Understand the assignment. These are the types of, I don't remember who I heard say it, but they were like, the Steelers are the Iowa of the NFL right now. This is just how they're going to.
Colors check out.
That's true too. This is just how they're going to win games. It's
having a tight end that's basically another offensive tackle checks out.
Caught a touchdown though.
I know.
When you're 6'7" and 280 catching touchdowns.
That's why I had him as a top 20 player in the draft.
That's maybe that shows up for you, but right now, look. The Steelers are playing their brand of football, and Justin Fields has bought into it, and that's big time. I'll tell you, a guy buying into Steeler brand of football, too. You mentioned the Broncos offensive line. Keanu Benton was just causing issues.
Yeah.
There's enough guys to block on this Steeler team already. You got Cam Hayward on his way to the Hall of Fame. You got T.J. Watt on the way to the Hall of Fame. You got Alex Highsmith, who's really darn good. I don't know about Hall of Fame, but he's really darn good. Then you got Keanu Benton in the middle. He plays 27 snaps, but grades an 88.8 overall. 4 positive run D grades in just 12 snaps, 2 pressures. This is a problem. This is when you play the Steelers, I don't know what you do about your defensive line, especially now with a guy, just this massive guy like Benton in the middle at 310 pounds. I think he even ran out on one play and made a tackle on a screen, like a bubble screen. I mean, you got 310 and athletic and strong as hell. He just caused Denver all sorts of issues inside. Obviously, the edges are a problem with Watt and Highsmith, but I was super impressed with Benton.
My most disappointing.
I didn't realize actually when I did this that we had the same thing, but it's worth talking about anyway.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be Broderick Jones, right?
Yeah. It's more to me. It's not just him.
He looked good a little bit last year too.
Or getting. I mean, He did, but they've also had this issue of this thing that they have right now in Pittsburgh with the offensive tackles and who's playing what position. Because we had Fautanu got hurt in the early going, in training camp or preseason or whatever. But Fautanu's a left tackle that you drafted from Washington. Broderick Jones at Georgia played left tackle. Last year you had Jones and Dan Moore Jr. Moore was the left side. They moved Jones to the right side after not even starting him the first game or two. So now Jones is on the right side. Then in training camp, we're going with Jones on the left side and Fautanu on the right, and then he gets hurt and we move Jones back. I don't know what we are doing.
It's not working well for
Steelers.
Broderick Jones, though.
It's not, and it's unfair to him. And look, I know he had 3 penalties on one drive, and Tomlin benched him and put Fautanu on the right side. But I've got guys playing out of position, or I don't know what position. Like, I understand, Trev, that guys are talented, and in theory, elite first-round talented guys should be able to just play wherever, right? Like, look, we've seen Tulisi Fuaga really adjust well. But at least he had the entire training camp. This flip-flopping and doing all this stuff, I think it's hurting multiple guys on this team. And now you're seeing it with Broderick Jones where it's like, okay, so now the right side, and now he's getting penalties and he's struggling. And I don't want to dig in on him too much because his rookie year was decent. It wasn't like world beating, but he had a solid rookie year. I thought they were drafting Fautanu to put him on the left side and bench Dan Moore Jr., who struggled last year.
Right.
But then it's getting flip-flopped and all sorts of – so I don't know. The Steelers are kind of winning right now despite of what's going on at offensive tackle, but this is a situation that has to get figured out.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. It's a big disappointing thing for an otherwise really surprisingly successful season. Surprisingly, that's disrespectful to what Mike Tomlin has done. He always just wins. He figures it out.
That's what they do.
Next game we're getting to, Bengals-Chiefs. We got 2 more. We got the Sunday night game. We got Bengals-Chiefs game, and then we're also going to get to the Thursday night football game as well. This one, down to the very last second, 26-25. The Kansas City Chiefs come away victorious. Surprise, surprise. We have the top 5 players for the Kansas City Chiefs. Center Creed Humphrey, 90.7. He's at the top of the list. Trey Smith, his running mate guard on the other side, 88.3. Linebacker Leo Chanel, 86.5. Guard Joe Tooney, 78.1. Gosh, just the best interior offensive line in the NFL.
By far.
Continues to be. Cornerback Trent McDuffie, round out of the top 5 at a 77.2. Patrick Mahomes, just a 58.7 overall grade in this one. And Cincinnati's side of things, edge rusher Trey Hendrickson, 89.8. Cam Taylor-Britt, 89.6. That unbelievable one-handed catch. Linebacker Jermaine Pratt, 83.9. Tight end Mike Gesicki with a 72.3. Safety Von Bell rounded things out in the top 5 with a 69.9. Joe Burrow with a 67.1 overall grade on the day. What was your stat that told the story here, Dalton?
For me, and I know you have something kind of similar, but it's the same one it was for me last week. These Bengals wide receivers, without T. Higgins, this is an issue. And let's start with this. They lost this game, and Joe Burrow was the better quarterback on the field in this game. Mahomes threw 3 interceptions, and yet here's what tells me. Jermaine Burton made his first career catch down the left sideline for 47 yards. The rest of the Bengals wide receivers on the day had 4 catches for 47 yards. I believe Mike Gesicki was their leading receiver. They're not going to win like that.
No.
They're just not. And I know they don't have Higgins, but Burton, you put Burton on the field for one snap, and he has a 47-yard catch, and you're struggling. And I know Yoshivas had 2 touchdowns down on the goal line. That's great, but those are the only 2 catches I think that went for 7 yards. There's an issue at receiver right now, and they need T. Higgins healthy. And I don't know what's the deal with Jermaine Burton, but for him to go out there cold and make the biggest play of the game, at least should tell you something.
Yeah.
What, is there not?
There's something going on because he doesn't do that and then doesn't play the whole game.
It doesn't feel like there's an on-field
reason
that he's
not playing. There's something going on
because he only played 4 snaps last week.
Right.
So I don't know what's going on there, but if they don't find – there's 2 things, and I'll get into the second one in a little bit. This wide receiver situation without T. Higgins is a mess because it's very clear if we just cover Jamar Chase, we'll be fine. They don't have any other – if they're not going to use Burton, they don't have any other explosive threats right now. And you feel for Burrow and you feel for their defense who played really well yesterday. They only gave up, 17 or 18 points, whatever it was on defense. the Bengals, right? They're short on weapons, and it feels so weird to say they're short on weapons.
Yeah, and on the other side, my staff that told the story, McDuffie was locked down on Chase. According to Next Gen Stats, McDuffie was on Chase for 45% of his routes, only allowed 1 catch for 4 yards and 2 targets. You had one guy, and I think that was the big matchup that we talked about on the preview show last week, is if McDuffie can take away Jamar, I don't think the Bengals have enough. I don't think they do.
And McDuffie's ability to move inside and out with Chase, there are so few corners able to do that. And the fact that it's why, for me, if you have a top 5 list of corners and McDuffie's not in it, I don't know what you're looking at.
He's been unbelievable, and that's my stat that tells the story there for how well he was able to take away their one weapon that they had that they could rely on. This team misses T. Higgins badly. And I think Bengals fans should actually be encouraged by this game. I know it's frustrating. I know there's no moral victories. I know you hate hearing that.
Their defense was
because
fantastic.
In reality, if they played the way they did against the Chiefs, how they played against the Patriots, they're 1-1 right now. There's no question about it. But for whatever reason, they were looking past the Patriots game. They thought it was at home. They thought they were going to sleepwalk to a win and just get ready for Arrowhead. Well, that didn't happen. Now they're obviously 0-2. But this is very clearly a team that can bounce back and play better, still be a postseason team if they kind of clean things up and obviously get T. Higgins back and healthy. Most impressive for me, Trey Hendrickson, just another fantastic game for him, 89.8 overall grade. To me, he's a tone setter, right? He's the one who's talking shit to the offensive tackles, in between every single play, whether they're giving them a hands to the face or whether they're holding them or whatever. He's letting them know. As that game was getting on in the second half and third quarter, fourth quarter, he's barking at these dudes. I don't know what he's saying. I'd love to hear him marked up. I'd love to hear it, but I don't know if he's telling Mahomes, hey, you better get rid of the ball quick because neither of these dudes can block.
He's telling him, he goes, you're trying to block an FAU legend. You can't do it. You just can't do it. That's what he's telling him.
You had to get it in there.
Absolutely.
But look, he is their guy on defense who sets the tone. I think they got a lot of great defensive players, but it all runs through Hendrickson. If Hendrickson has an elite day, that defense can hold up and make plays against basically any offense in the NFL. I think that we saw that this past Sunday. What about you? Most impressive?
You got one elite pass rusher. I got one on the other side. And look, we have to just say it over and over. When we watch Chris Jones, we're watching one of the best players to ever play football. 90.2 pass rush grade, 7 pressures, a sack, 17% pass rush win rate. His pressure set up Burrow having to step up in the pocket. That forced eventually the fumble was forced, and Shamari Connor returned it for a touchdown. But you could probably do this a lot of weeks, and I could probably just cheat and pick Chris Jones every week, but it's just dominant, like he always is. It's just big number 95, another one like Bobby Wagner, just doesn't age.
Nope.
Ever. He's just who's the best D tackle in football? It's either Chris Jones or Dexter Lawrence.
Right.
That's just where we're at. Chris Jones, until he slows down at all. And McDuffie's great, and they have so many great players. How good is Leo Chenal playing right now for their defense too? But
what underrated versatility with Leo Chenal.
Oh yeah,
they will play him anywhere from nose tackle to 7 technique to off-ball linebacker to Mike linebacker.
He was off the edge more than he was at linebacker this week.
But Chris, so good.
Chris Jones, he's the straw that stirs the drink.
Of course,
you're watching a first ballot Hall of Fame, just one of the great defensive players of all time every week, and he was great again this week.
Most disappointing for me, I think they threw out Kingsley Suamataia a little too early. 26.4 pass blocking grade, 4 pressures allowed, 2 sacks, gets benched for Wanya Morris. With Kingsley, I think that his scouting report for almost everybody, certainly for us, read, hey, really talented player, moves really well for his size, doesn't know what he's doing yet. And I think the Chiefs are like, hey, he'll figure it out. Let's throw him out there. He'll learn. Now he's getting you in trouble. So much so that they had to bench him in this game. I don't know what it's going to look like moving forward for him, but that's a most disappointing. Not a super unexpected thing. If you were going to throw him out there early, I'd probably told you that this was going to be somewhat of the result. It was going to look something like this. But still, for him to be a starter and then give up the pressure that he did and eventually get benched, I think he has to be disappointing. But what about you?
Oh, real quick, Wanya Morris. Good hands.
Touchdown,
hands, for sure. Good hands.
You love a big man touchdown.
Might be one of their better receivers. So we've already got the Bengals wide receiver problem that I do think is fixable. I need T. Higgins healthy, and I need Jermaine Burton to play more. I'm actually even more concerned with what's going on in the interior of this Bengal defense.
More?
With these, yes. The Bengals receiver situation is fixable. I think Higgins has to get healthy, and I would play Burton more. That's just me, right? I don't know what's going on there. I don't know that there's a solution to what's going on in the interior. These Bengal defensive tackles, losing DJ Reader has been a nightmare for the run defense. And even when he was around and on the team, in the snaps that he wasn't playing, this is what they looked like in run defense. And now that he's gone, they look like it all the time. The Bengals defensive tackles in this game had a 28.8 run defense grade. The Chiefs interior 3 against this set of defensive tackles. And B.J. Hill, the best one, you could argue, got injured early in this game and was out the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bloodbath. There's no other way to put it. The Chiefs interior 3 against this group was the biggest mismatch of any game this week. Even more, even as much as the Panthers and whatever else you want to throw out. This matchup was the biggest mismatch of the entire week in any game.
Yeah.
And the receiver thing, I think there's a solution, maybe. Like, okay, there's a thought that put the speed guys and get Higgins healthy and we have Burrow and we can get it going. I have no idea how the Bengals solve this run defense thing right now. I have no.
Play better. That's it. That's all you can do.
I don't think
prayer.
I look. Literally,
they can play better, but what's the ceiling of this team? Or I think more importantly, we're fearing the floor.
I'm more scared of this issue than the receiver one. Actually, I think this could be the thing.
That's fair, though.
I think this could be the thing that really drops their season into kind of a problem here.
Last game that we're talking about, because it was last Thursday's game, Bills at Dolphins. Bills come away with the win, 31-10 in this one. Obviously, scary situation with Tua Tagovailoa getting hit in the head and then going out and sort of his future being up in the air. Doesn't sound like he's contemplating retirement from last that I saw, but just another concussion for him. And so obviously we hope that he is all good and that he's going to be fully healthy. That's first and foremost. But when we look at the top fives for this team, look at the Buffalo Bills. Von Miller, he's back, baby.
Ageless
resurgence again. Now, I don't know about ageless. He's been very, very hot and cold, and particularly cold. But this one, he was hot. He was back. Von Miller of old, 90.7 to top the list here for the Buffalo Bills. Tight end Dalton Kincaid with an 87.8. Running back James Cook, 87.3. Defensive tackle Ed Oliver with an 81.2. And then Christian Benford, their cornerback, with a 78.8. Josh Allen had a 77.1 grade on the day. For Miami side of things, linebacker Jordan Brooks had an elite 92.2 to lead all Miami Dolphins. Running back Devon Achane with a 76.0. Defensive tackle Zach Seiler, 74.3. Tight end Jonnu Smith with a 73.3. Kendall Lamb with a 73.2, their offensive tackle there. And then Tua Tagovailoa, like we mentioned, he did not finish the game, finished with a 48.0 PFF grade. What's the stat that told the story here, Dalton?
I'm going to roll the stat, my most impressive, into one thing here. But the stat for me, it sounds funny. Josh Allen, only 141 total yards. And you think about that, and we looked at this Bills team in the preseason. We're wondering about their defense and where it was at, and you have young receivers. And the thought for a lot of people, I think, was, well, they can't win if Josh Allen's not Superman, right? Like he was in week 1.
That's a great point.
And I sit here and I go, okay, they just dominated a football game where Allen only had 141 total yards. I think he only had 1 carry for 3 yards. But you look at the Bills, 110 rushing yards as a team. James Cook, 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Five different players with a carry, 8 different players with a target. Obviously a very good night on defense, and they seem to have the Dolphins' number on defense. But I'm going to roll this into the most impressive for me, Joe Brady. Sitting there watching it on Thursday, I just thought he called a fabulous game. I really do. I think the Dolphins came out blitzing early. He had answers for it. That first touchdown to James Cook was a great play call, just sneaking Cook underneath and getting him out in the flat when it's man-to-man. The blitz is coming. Then they start backing off, and he starts running the ball, and just everything about the way Joe Brady called this game, I thought was terrific. The balance in their offense. You know, you mentioned Dalton Kincaid last week, and I was like, don't worry, it's coming. They move things around,
right? And it did. It wasn't a landslide, but 4 catches, 4 targets,
and you just have to, like with the Bills. And I know they don't have Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or one of those guys, but the amount of balance that they have, they can go to someone. Last week it was Allen having to carry it, and this week then it was James Cook and Kincaid, and Shakir had another good game. And next week it could be somebody else. It could be Ray Davis teeing off. I mean, they have so many guys that are at least credible threats. And the fact that they won this game against this team on the road with Josh Allen not having to do a whole lot, made a couple nice throws. The one rolling to his right, it's just anytime he rolls to his right and makes a throw like that, it's just silly. But this is the type of Bills effort that makes me think, okay, they could win enough games to win this division again, because it shows that it's not just Josh Allen.
My stat that told the story, you talk about having answers for something. The Bills got an answer for Tyreek Hill. They do, because in this game, obviously, again, I want to mention, Tua did not finish the game. I understand. Hill had 6 targets for 3 catches for only 24 yards. He's one of the most dominant receivers in the NFL. Tyreek Hill's career average is 81.7 receiving yards a game and 5.8 receptions per game. So a little over 80 yards a game and almost 6 receptions per game. When he has played the Buffalo Bills in his career, whether he was when he was at Kansas City or whether he was in Miami, 48.8 receiving yards per game, almost half, and just 5.1 receptions per game. They limit Tyreek Hill. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I got to think better than any team in the NFL.
I don't think he's had a 100-yard game against them in his career.
I think he has.
Maybe one?
No, maybe you're right there. Because I looked if he scored touchdowns. He's got 2 touchdowns against the Bills, but he might not have a 100-yard game against this team.
I think even the game in the snow last year in Buffalo, it was Waddle that had a lot of
They know how to shut down Tyreek Hill better than any team in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the stat that told the story. That is when, if you could shut down Tyreek Hill for this offense, yeah, there's a lot of speed everywhere else, but it starts with the fact that Tyreek Hill is basically the most uncoverable wide receiver in the league. And when you shut that down, the rest of it, while still talented, can it really be primary factors? And sometimes it can some weeks, but against the Bills, certainly this past week, it could not. My most impressive, we talked about Von Miller, 88.0 pass rush grade versus Miami, his highest since the 2020, his highest single game performance since the 2021 playoffs, where the Rams were going on that playoff run to win that Super Bowl. 1 sack, 4 pressures, and a 22.7 pass rush win percentage. And then my most disappointing, I'll get to that real quick and then hear what yours is, Austin Jackson. The offensive tackle for the Miami Dolphins. Jackson in week 1, 82.5 pass blocking grade, only 1 pressure allowed. And then in week 2, which is a 19.6 pass blocking grade with 7 pressures allowed. That is massively different for Austin Jackson. We got to meet somewhere in the middle, and we got to make sure that floor is a lot higher than what it was this past week against the Buffalo Bills. So who is your most disappointing here?
So this, especially now that they won't be in as many high-scoring games, we don't know how long Tua will be out for, and they're going to have Skylar Thompson starting. But this Miami secondary has got to start holding up their end of the bargain here. Right now, team coverage grade 49.1 through 2 games. That's only ahead of the Commanders and Cardinals. And this is a team with Jalen Ramsey, with Javon Holland, with Kendall Fuller was a big pickup, supposed to be a good fit, and they just seem to be struggling across the board at limiting explosive plays and some different looks in zone coverages than they used last year under Vic Fangio. Every player in their secondary in this game had a coverage grade under 67, and they, for some reason, it's just not working. It's hard to pin down because they have really, really talented guys in their secondary. And even with some of the pass rushers recovering from and coming back from injury, you figured, okay, they're going to be able to cover. Look at all these names. And I don't know if it's the most expensive secondary in the league, but it's probably close. And they just paid Jalen Ramsey all that money, I think over $24 million a year. But they're going to have to be better than they've been the first 2 games. They're giving up too many big plays to me over the middle of the field as well. It's just something's not clicking in coverage for the Dolphins right now. And it better start because they with Skylar Thompson starting, they need to play elite defense.
For sure. There's no doubt about it. They got to be up to the challenge to really kind of weather the storm here with their quarterback situation. There we go. 15 games reviewed. We got one more game here in week 2. It is the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles coming up on Monday Night Football. You heard a lot of PFF stats in this show. You will all season long here on this channel. If you want to see all those stats for yourself and all these grades and everything like that, you can go to PFF.com, get a PFF Plus subscription, get some premium stats, and you can see all these things and dig even deeper than we do into your specific team. So that's the best way to do that. Head on over to PFF.com and get yourself a PFF Plus subscription. Throughout the rest of this week, we're still reviewing the games that have already been played. We'll review the Monday Night Football game as well. Of course, we'll have the Trenches show. We'll have the rookie review. We'll have a quarterback spotlight as well, so look for that on the channel. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the Grades Review Show here for week 2. We'll see you on the PFF NFL channel tomorrow as well. See ya.